Arc 8, Chapter 22, Want to Believe. Will not forgive. Village Chief Kun, may I have a moment? As a voice called out to him from behind, Vincent Volakia halted his step. Before he even turned around, he knew who the owner of that voice was. Once he heard a voice, or laid eyes upon a person, he would never forget them. This was no exception. He immediately grasped that this was the blonde, blue-eyed peddler, Flop O'Connell. Vincent, unfortunately, the survival of the Empire is currently in crisis. I have not the time for frivolous chatter with you. Though he had grasped it, Vincent would not engage any further than grasping it. The oracle he had received a moment ago from the stargazer, Ubilk, left him no choice but to discuss with Bastet's, Serena, and the rest of that lot regarding how they should handle it. Groovy had been designated as a countermeasure against the enemy, but since there was a high chance he had lost his life, to formulate a plan that depended on him would be an act akin to the height of stupidity. On that point, putting his expectations in Natsuki Subaru, who was headed to persuade the other person who had been designated, was a foolish idea that was less objectionable. In the first place, there was no chance that Vincent would be able to persuade that girl. He would not even be able to come to a mutual understanding with her. Since the cards in Vincent's hand could not be used on the young girl, it was logical to let Subaru deal with that side of the two lights. Ergo, the only thing Vincent could do was continue scrutinizing the details for a realistic plan. Flop, whoa there, you can't know whether it's frivolous chatter or not unless you talk and find out. No matter how clever Village Chief Kun is, I doubt you'd be able to tell what seeds of conversation I have before you water them. Vincent, you. Speaking those words, Flop grabbed Vincent's shoulder as the latter tried to resume his walk, preventing him from moving forward. Naught could that be called but a reckless action, the very pinnacle of imprudence. Under different circumstances, it would have been a barbaric act that caused Flop to be beheaded on the spot. Vincent, release me at once. If not, wish your life goodbye. Flop, of course, I'd also like to start talking with you right away. But, I want a suitable amount of time to have a proper discussion about this matter. We can't be rushing things. Vincent, I did not tell you to speak, but to release your grip. Now, don't say that, Abel Chin. Instead, you should talk about what Big Bro wants to tell you. Vincent, HK? As he looked back with his head and scowled at Flop, who still had his hand placed on Vincent's shoulder, a voice had called out from in front of him. Simultaneously, another reckless act had been performed, that of two hands grabbing him by his sides and lifting him up. Having held her breath, and now giving a cheerful broad smile, the one who had done that was Medium O'Connell, the sibling duo of Flop and Medium, had pincered Vincent with smiles from both front and rear. Medium, Abel Chin, you've been disregarding Big Bro this whole time, right? Big Bro is so injured and worn out that he always needs to lie down for even just a second longer, so don't be mean and just listen to what he has to say. Vincent, speak not of foolish things. To begin with, how long shall you continue to contact me with such a familiar attitude? Should the situation change, so shall individual positions. Things are no longer the same as they were in the Shadrakian village and the fortress city. Medium, well, Abel Chin may be acting like the Emperor, but I think it's mistaken of you to make light of us. Big Bro. Flop, got it, dear sister. The unreasonable sibling pair did not lend their ears to Vincent's words. At the high-spirited call of his younger sister, Flop, responding in a similarly energetic manner, promptly opened the door to the adjacent passenger cabin. Medium then carried Vincent inside, and the door was closed. After quickly confining the Emperor in a locked room, Medium finally released Vincent. Vincent, you too, are you aware that this is an act so barbaric that not only you, but all members of your household will be punished for? Flop, ha 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 ha, unfortunately for you, Village Chief Kun, our family purely consists of us two siblings. So, your objection isn't really much of a threat. Medium, but, Big Bro, what about everyone from the orphanage? Even if we aren't related by blood, everyone who escaped is our family. Flop, ha 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 ha, now that you mention it. Village Chief Kun, please find it within yourself to forgive us. Vincent, set me free immediately, and behave. No matter the situation, the conduct of the O'Connell siblings seemed invariant. Medium had been shrunken and stretched, and Flop seemed to have been injured, but seeing the both of them like this was causing him to grow suspicious. If one had their bodies shrunken and stretched, it would typically be a heavy burden on their mind, but Medium was far too lacking in awareness that her body had shrunk and then stretched back again. He had heard that Flop had also suffered a grievous wound that brought him to the verge of death, but he too was full of life. No, his neck had a visible complexion, but it seemed he was concealing the color in his face using makeup. Flop, after all, it's quite important for merchants to put on an act. Vincent, Flop, but, although it's always been an ironclad rule of trade to barter for what you want, I'm unable to meet Village Chief Kun's current demands. I don't want to put this off any longer. Vincent, what are you saying? Flop, I've been entrusted with a message. A message from the person who, in your place, had acted as emperor. Having expected him to start speaking more nonsense, Vincent's eyes slightly widened. Going out of their way to confine the emperor in an empty cabin, the O'Connell siblings were attempting to report something to Vincent. In this world, there was only one person who had held that position. That was why? Flop, you ought to hear his words, Village Chief Kun. No, Your Excellency the Emperor, Vincent Wallachia. Thus, when Flop displayed a serious expression for the first time, Vincent had chosen not to interrupt him with words. The Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, Louis Arneb. When he spoke those words aloud, Subaru had heard a grating sound reverberate within his heart. While it was always within arm's reach, he had always hesitated to take the lid off of that box of taboos. It was a Pandora's box that could be opened at any time, so long as he was willing to do so. Subaru, Deciding this was not a conversation suitable for a corridor, they had relocated, moving to a spacious passenger cabin. Abel's thoughtful allowance for them to use this cabin if necessary was a rare display of consideration for the feelings of others. Though, since the resolution of this matter was of critical importance to the Empire, it might have been natural for him to give that thoughtful allowance. Gathered in the cabin were Emilia, Beatrice, Otto, Garfield, and Roswell of the Emilia camp, and in addition, Anastasia, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony. Really, it's a connection that seems to pop up indiscriminately. Elegantly touching her cheek, Anastasia quietly murmured so, and Julius was maintaining a solemn silence by her side. The participation of these two was also essential. That was not merely because they had traveled a great distance to cross the border to assist Subaru and his friends, but because they too had suffered from the damage caused by gluttony. Subaru, the person at the crux of the matter, Louis, she's currently with Rem and some others. I think everyone except Anastasia San and Julius should already know about Louis, but Beatrice, of course, in fact. Frankly, it was an outrageous surprise at first, I suppose. Subaru, that was the case for me too. Beatrice's wording of surprise was likely a generous understatement. In fact, when Subaru had first realized that he had been transported with Louis, his sole intention had been to protect Rem, which caused him to adopt a rather aggressive stance. At first, this led to Rem being quite wary of him, perceiving him as someone who could not be trusted. Subaru did not know under what circumstances Emilia and the others had met Louis, but it was not difficult to imagine that their initial contact would have been fraught with tension. With that in mind, he wanted to express his gratitude that no one had resorted to extreme measures. Subaru, you all did well to hold yourselves back. I'm sure Otto and Garfield were ready to erupt at any moment. Otto, indeed, Garfield and I were of the opinion that we should either eliminate or restrain her. The fact that she was not subjected to either was due to Emilia Summer persuading everyone else. Subaru, Emilia Tan did that. As one might expect, it seemed that Otto was at the forefront of the radical faction, but his views had apparently been tempered by Emilia, who was of the moderate faction. As Subaru and the others turned their gazes to her, she gave a short nod, saying yes. Emilia, Medium Chan, was defending that child. Louis, with all her might. Considering how much those around her cherished her, I was scared of trying to decide anything and everything on the spot. Subaru, I see, Medium-san did that. Hearing that Medium had defended Louis, Subaru felt a faint sense of relief. Originally, Louis had grown quite attached to the cheerful and caring Medium. Still, the last time Subaru had witnessed that between the two was back in the demon city of Chaos Flame, when Medium had been afraid of Louis after her identity as a Sin Archbishop had been revealed. If Medium had still defended Louis after that, there must have been some shift in her feelings that had taken place somewhere unbeknownst to Subaru. That made him happy. Emilia, that's something I've also experienced. Having people say that I'm really scary, that I seem like a witch to everyone, and nobody around me would want to talk to me. So, Otto, for Emilia Summer's case, it is due to irrational prejudice against half-elves. However, with this girl, there is a difference. A clear distinction, resulting from none other than her own actions. Emilia, Otto-kun. As Emilia explained why she stood by Louis in addition to Medium's protection, Otto bluntly offered his stern comment. He did not hesitate to clarify his position as an ally of Emilia and, simultaneously, an adversary of Louis. Indeed, their journey together so far had been nothing more than a deferment until the final conclusion. Roswell, may I have a word? Into the tense atmosphere created by Otto's declaration, Roswell raised his hand casually. As Subaru's glance urged him to speak, Roswell closed his blue eye, and Roswell, Ram, Anastasia Summer, and I joined later, after all Tilda. We really don't know how that girl, Louis, behaves. But, is there anything suspicious about her? Of course, Garfield has been keeping his eyes, ears, and nose peeled on her, hasn't he? Garfield, I wasn't exactly peeled from head to toe like that. But, I gotta agree with Ottobro. That's why, from the moment we met her till the big battle, I kept a close eye on her, but Roswell, so, it turned out to be in vain. Thean Tilda, how can you definitively say that the girl is a dangerous Sin Archbishop? Otto, because of Beatrice Chan and I, we encountered a girl claiming to be Louis Arneb, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, in Pristella. I had my leg gouged in then, and it is not something I will forget. Roswell, representing those who had less interaction with Louis, made a statement to which Garfield and Otto expressed their respective views. As Otto stroked his leg, it was a reminder of the injury that had caused him to be taken out of action for quite some time. It made sense as to why Otto, in particular, was very cautious of Louis. Julius, my apologies for following the Margrave, but may I also speak? Once Roswell's question had been addressed, Julius quickly joined the conversation. In this discussion about gluttony, Julius, who had been making a difficult face from the beginning, glanced at an even more grim-looking Subaru out of the corner of his eye and said, Julius, first, I would like to confirm. Is it correct that the girl named Louis, who is currently riding in this dragon carriage, is indeed the same individual as Louis Arneb, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony? Emilia, what do you mean by that? Julius, Emilia Summer and Lady Ram must be aware, in order to replicate the powers of those it devours, there were instances where gluttony had changed its appearance to match that of its victim. In other words, Anastasia, so, you're suggesting the possibility that the Louis we're talking about and the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony might not be the same person, but one who was consumed by the other? At Julius's conjecture, Emilia and the others wore faces of surprise. Indeed, considering the nature of gluttony, it was not an improbable theory. If gluttony could mimic the form of the person it consumed, it would make sense that the original, who was consumed, would still exist somewhere. If this was true, then the existence of this Louis could be separated from that of gluttony. However, Subaru, no, that's not likely. Louis, I believe, is reproducing the abilities of those she has devoured. It must be due to the authority of gluttony. Julius, I see. My apologies for such misleading speculation. Julius closed his eyes and apologized as Subaru shook his head. It was no fault of Julius. If his hypothesis were correct, Subaru would not be as troubled as he was right now. But they could not resort to makeshift solutions created by tiptoeing around the issue. What they needed was not just an answer, but an answer derived from a shared understanding of the truth. Louis had been transported alongside Subaru to the Wallachian Empire, and yet, despite being treated so harshly by Subaru, she pushed herself time and again to help him, suffered injuries, and even put her life at risk. It was her, Louis Arneb, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, who was the same person as the Louis that they all knew, to get everyone to acknowledge that she was an essential presence for the upcoming battle. Subaru, First, let me explain what happened with me and Louis in the Empire after I was sent here with Rem, before any of you came across Louis. Silently, everyone directed their gazes towards him. Under the scrutiny of his trusted comrades, Subaru unmistakably felt a sense of suffocation. It was as if a grading of exams or a verification of answers was about to begin. It was a verification of whether Louis could truly be accepted by his comrades for who she was. Emilia, Subaru, there's no need to rush. Emilia gently reassured Subaru, who was bracing himself for what was to come. Beatrice, by his side, gave his hand a gentle squeeze with a nod of affirmation. Comforted by their consideration, Subaru took a deep breath and began to speak. Subaru, the very first thing we noticed was that we were next to a large forest far to the east. He had intended to speak plainly, choosing his words to convey the facts as succinctly as possible. Still, the things he had to talk about sprang forth like a gushing spring, making him acutely aware that the days he had to recount were filled with significant moments, despite the brevity of the time in question. To begin with, a tremendous amount of trouble had occurred in just a short period. All of it comprised accidents that endangered the lives of Subaru, Rem, and their companions, and, naturally, Louis was inevitably involved in these. Naturally. Yes, it was indeed natural. After all, Louis had been with Subaru and the others the entire time, enduring Subaru's hostility while receiving kindness from Rem, and she persevered without being discouraged by the harsh treatment from Subaru. So, Subaru, Louis and I, collaborating with Yona-san, managed to win our bet against Olbart-san. It was with a bit of cheating, though, as we changed the rules from hide-and-seek to a game of tag. Subaru, after that, something unimaginable happened at Chaos Flame, as you may have heard. The people living there miraculously survived and we were able to join up with Abel and his rebels. I lost consciousness there and got separated. You guys probably know more about what happened with Louis after that, right? Emilia, Yes. We met Abel and the others when they came back to the destroyed Garrel, which happened right after. As Emilia nodded in confirmation of Subaru's statement, he finished his explanation and took a long breath. Even though Subaru had intended not to take up too much time, in the end, the story lasted nearly an hour. He was grateful that during that time, his companions mostly refrained from interrupting and listened intently. Inevitably, Subaru had to tell the story from his own perspective, but he tried to be as detached as possible in narrating the events. With that in mind, Subaru, as I've told you, there wasn't any suspicious behavior from Louis while she was with me. I believe you can hear the same story from Rem. Otto, we are not really doubting that. If we truly thought her suspicious, there is no way Ram-san would have allowed her to stay near Rem-san. When it came to her family, and especially Rem, there was no need to mention the intensity of Ram's scrutiny. In fact, the primary reason she overwhelmed Gluttony's Lay-Baton Catos at the Pleiades watchtower was her profound objection to any interference with her relationship between Rem and herself. Ram, who could go to such lengths for a sister she did not remember, if she felt even the slightest hint of danger from Louis, it would have been unthinkable for her to leave Louis near Rem, who had just awakened. Anastasia, we've roughly grasped how tough it was for ya, Natsuki-kun. Anastasia, who had been silently listening until now, was massaging her brow with a finger, acknowledging the harshness of Subaru's journey. Even for a woman as wise as she, the sequence of events presented a volume of information that took time and effort to fully digest. Having somehow swallowed it all down, Anastasia removed her finger from her forehead and... Anastasia, I'm curious about what happened to ya, Natsuki-kun, after ya lost consciousness in the Demon City, but since that ain't the main subject, let's put it aside. Subaru, yeah, right now, what's important is Louis. As I've said, Louis hasn't shown her dangerous side to us so far. And there's the prophecy of Ubilk, the Stargazer. That's a factor too. So, in the upcoming battle, having Louis cooperate with us. Anastasia, the question's about your story, where's the point of compromise that you're gonna take? Just like that, her quiet interjection stopped Subaru's train of thought. Anastasia, having voiced her thoughts, gently traced her lips with the finger that had been massaging her brow. Her intellectually vibrant aqua eyes seized Subaru's heart as she continued. Anastasia, I ain't against your idea of using everything at our disposal, Natsuki-kun. Even Meili-san, who helped us cross the Augria sand dunes, was originally an enemy. If we're making such distinctions, then the same applies to that girl. Subaru, that's, well, the same, right? Meili and Louis should be in the same position. Anastasia, no, it ain't the case. I'm sure everyone but ya, Natsuki-kun, would think so. Subaru, HK. Confronted with that calm assertion, Subaru looked around at the others in surprise. Anastasia's words echoed in Subaru's mind as he scanned everyone's faces, hoping that someone would disagree. However, not one of them met his expectations. Subaru, everyone. HK. Otto, since no one seems to be willing to say it, I will. Among the group, all wearing grave expressions, Otto raised his hand without changing his demeanor. However, his unchanging demeanor did not denote a lack of emotional response, but was the mere reflection of his calmness, sustained since the start of the meeting. Neither his gaze nor his voice were unconditionally supportive of Subaru. Otto, I agree with Anastasia Summer. The situation with her and Meili-chan is different. They are not in the same position. Subaru, Otto. Otto, I will take it upon myself to say what no one else seems to want to. It is because she is a Sin Archbishop. Otto answered Subaru, whose voice had inadvertently risen, with a calm tone. Anticipating Subaru's question, Otto's response was as fitting as it could possibly be for the reason why none present could side with Subaru. Beatrice, Subaru, Betty wants to stand by Subaru, in fact. If Subaru says that girl, Louis, is a girl without evil intentions now, Betty can believe that too, I suppose. But Roswell, the fact is, gluttony's victims include us. Not to mention, considering that the damage is not easily apparent, I wonder what the extent of the potential victims is, right Julius, though there is no way to confirm it. The bitter regret of those who lost themselves, forgotten by others, and could not return while having anybody to turn to, I cannot imagine how they must feel. Following up on the concerned Beatrice, Roswell and Julius expressed their genuine opinions, as a person heavily concerned with a victim, and as an actual victim of gluttony's authority respectively. Roswell and Julius were correct, those who knew they had been affected were comparatively better off. There must have been many victims who could do nothing but be truly wrought in despair, having lost their names and memories, left without a place to return, unable to be saved. And thus, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, who had created numerous victims. Emilia, it's not that everyone doesn't believe it. Subaru, Emilia. Emilia, it's not that. Rather, I think they won't forgive her. Subaru's explanation was not lacking, nor did his feelings not get through to them. Emilia's words, with her eyebrows furrowed, shattered his heart as she explained that the real problem was not there. Knowing about Louis's time with Subaru, and knowing what happened after his absence, Emilia and the others knew the current Louis was not a threat to them. Having understood that, the issue at hand was the actions of the past Louis. Anastasia, the things you've done ain't ever gonna disappear. Subaru, HK. Quietly, Anastasia murmured those words. Once before, it was a despairing warning that had frozen Natsuki Subaru, crushing him to pieces. The fact that those words were thrown at him only existed within himself. And once again, in a different turn of events, they were delivered from her mouth to Subaru's ears. Anastasia, no matter how much Natsuki-kun tries to convince us that that child is harmless, it doesn't even up the harm she did. In reality, the victims remain victims. It ain't a superficial problem that can be brushed aside with pretenses for your own benefit. Subaru, HK. Anastasia, first off, don't you think that should come after getting back all the names and memories that have been eaten so far? Even if you try to proceed without them, wouldn't Natsuki-kun also be dissatisfied with that? Anastasia's sharp words sliced through the stiffened Subaru one after another. All of their arguments were valid, but the one that caused the greatest pain was the final point, that they could not even stand on the very foundation for deciding Louis's fate, if they did not return the memories and names that had been taken. That was the crucial premise leading to what Emilia had said: they can't forgive her. Roswell, well, His Excellency the Emperor is aware of this prophecy. Subaru-kun heard. Saying that we won't let this girl, Louis, cooperate in the battle is just not realistic, is it, Tilda? Garfield, huh? What do you wanna say? Speak clearly. Roswell, it's troubling to have your irritation taken out on me, but no matter how our discussion ends, the plan to involve the girl won't change. The only thing left is how she will be treated afterwards. Subaru, treated? His heart grew impatient with Roswell, who still continued with his roundabout way of talking after being told to speak clearly. In response to Subaru's earnest gaze, Roswell shrugged his shoulders and spoke. That was. Roswell, it's a matter of what we can tell her to make her cooperate, Tilda. For instance, we could promise her amnesty once we overcome this crisis threatening the Empire. And then, once everything's done, the appropriate punishment for her crimes will be executed solemnly. This is the best way to handle it without any future problems. Garfield, HK, stop messing around. In response to Roswell's explanation of his wicked plan, Garfield clicked his fangs and snapped at him. He glared fiercely at Roswell, and Garfield, even if the other guy's a villain, we don't have to stoop to the same level. Dangling some bait that doesn't even exist just to get her to help, no way I'll approve of that. Roswell, oh, really? You know, I think Otto-kun was thinking the same thing. Garfield, don't lump yourself in with Otto, bro. Otto, the Margrave is speaking for the majority. Sin archbishops should not be granted any amnesty. Or rather. There, Otto paused for a moment and gazed fixedly at Subaru. As Subaru gulped under his gaze, he continued mercilessly. Otto, is Natsuki-san trying to create a precedent where Sin archbishops are forgiven? Subaru, HK, I don't intend on doing anything like that. In this world, there are villains who mustn't be forgiven. The Sin archbishops of the witch cult are definitely among them. Betelgeuse, Regulus, the brothers Roy and Lay, Sirius, Capella, every Sin archbishop Subaru had encountered up until now were all invariably far beyond redemption. They were beings who would not hesitate to sacrifice others to satisfy their own desires. However, Otto, are you saying only Louis Arneb is different? Subaru, that's, well. Otto's query attempted to lay bare the depths of Subaru's heart. Sin archbishops should not be forgiven. Not just Otto, but everyone drew this line in the sand, something Subaru could clearly understand. Yet the insistence on putting Louis in a separate category, as Otto put it, was indeed strange. Subaru, under the scrutiny of everyone's gazes, Subaru once again questioned himself. What did Subaru want to do with Louis? They harbored great hatred for each other in the Hall of Memories, and Subaru chose not to save her as she suffered from the aftermath of return by death. He did not think that choice was a mistake. Even if he were to be placed in that situation once more, he would most likely make the same decision. However, at the same time, he knew the Louis who had shared hardships with him in the Wallachian Empire. The fact that he had witnessed her risk her life to save him and die for it multiple times was certainly engraved in his soul. Somewhere along the way, Subaru's vigilance had been melted away by Louis's earnestness. Emilia, how? Subaru, .. Suddenly, a hushed question was posed to Subaru just as he was deep in thought. As he opened his closed eyelids, he found himself looking directly into Emilia's amethyst eyes. She narrowed her long-lashed eyes and repeated the same question once more. That was, Emilia, how did Subaru come to think that way? Subaru, how, you ask? Emilia, you really couldn't stand the sin Archbishop of Gluttony, could you, Subaru? You thought you couldn't forgive her. So, why now? Subaru, that's because. Didn't I already tell you? She, Louis, in this empire with us. They had shared many hardships, and Louis had bravely tried to protect Subaru and Rem. The events in the empire had left their mark on Subaru, as much as or with even more intensity than the unforgivable enemy she had been thought to be in the Hall of Memories. That was why? That was why Natsuki Subaru's feelings towards Louis had changed. Julius, Subaru, let me once again convey a harsh truth to you. Julius said this in a low voice to Subaru, who had answered Emilia's question falteringly. The fact he prefaced his words as harsh made Subaru brace himself. As Subaru prepared himself for it, Julius traced the scar under his left eye with his finger and addressed him. Julius, humanity in this world will not forgive the sin Archbishop of Gluttony, the girl known as Louis Arneb. Whether it be the kingdom or the empire, you can say it is the consensus of the world. Subaru, .. Julius, even if she were to flee to any corner of the world, there is no place where she would be pardoned. Acts of crime will be met with punishment. And, a sin archbishop is a criminal whose sins can only be atoned for with their life. There was no falsehood in that preamble of the harsh truth. Julius decisively pronounced it in a clear, strong tone, leaving no room for misunderstanding. There was no place in this world where Louis Arneb could live and be forgiven. At those heavy words, Subaru was left unable to respond. However, Julius, I too, desire nothing but death for sin archbishops. Nothing but death for the beings we consider enemies of the world. That is what I can say, with all my soul. Subaru, what? Otto, Julius Julius. The person who had raised their voice sharply, glaring at Julius, was Otto. Subaru, unable to comprehend the meaning behind those added words, was left aside with widened eyes as Otto and Julius stared at each other piercingly. Julius's gaze was filled with pain, while Otto's was bitter, their eyes wounding each other. Otto, for you, an outsider, to say that is outrageously selfish. Julius, I am sorry, but I would like to correct your perception on this matter. I am also one of the parties involved. I am in a position to voice my opinion, so allow me to exercise that right. Otto, HK. Gritting his teeth, Otto's glare towards Julius grew sharper. Despite knowing he was no match in terms of fighting strength, the intensity of his gaze did not even budge. Julius, too, closed one eye at that strength of Otto's will and let out a small sigh. Subaru, nothing but death, for the sin archbishops. Beside the back and forth between the two, Subaru muttered while feeling as if a part of his brain had gone numb. What Julius had tried to say, and why the perceptive Otto had snapped at him, Subaru had not noticed what had been hidden beyond the surface level of words. Nothing but death for the sin archbishops was desired. The world would not forgive Louis Arneb. The sin archbishops, Louis Arneb, the world would not. Subaru, ah. Beatrice, Subaru, Betty will speak now, in fact. The moment he felt the sensation of a slight breeze blowing across the labyrinth of thoughts, Beatrice spoke up, looking up at Subaru with her round eyes of a distinctive pattern. Beatrice, Betty ran into the Sin Archbishop Louis back in Pristella, I suppose. After that, this time when we happened to meet in the Empire, this is what Betty thought about that girl's state. In fact, it's as if she's a different person, I suppose. Subaru, .. Beatrice, that girl, she's different from the Sin Archbishop Betty knows, in fact. How was it from Subaru's perspective, I suppose? From the perspective of Subaru, who had directly spoken with the Sin Archbishop up close, Beatrice's kind, yet inescapable words questioned him. He understood what she meant. For Subaru, it was something he had refused to acknowledge because he did not want to acknowledge it. That the current Louis and the Louis Arneb he had met in the Hall of Memories seemed to be different people. However, just as he had refuted Julius's suspicion, Louis had been using her authority. Just as gluttony had used it, she was able to freely utilize the special abilities of her eaten victims. Louis still possessed the authority of gluttony, but her mind alone had been born anew. That was just like Subaru, just like me, when I had lost my memories. If that was indeed so, had Louis been suffering this whole time? Just like how back then, Subaru had chased after the phantom of Natsuki Subaru, troubled and distressed at being unable to trust anyone around him, had Louis also been seeking help. Even if that was the case, Louis had still helped Subaru and Rem, and had made it through to this day. Then, Emilia, you know, I've been thinking about this the whole time. Once you do something bad, is it already too late to undo it? Subaru, Emilia. Emilia, you apologize, you atone, but even then if you're told that it's not enough, then sometimes you get fed up with apologizing and atonement, right? So, I've been thinking about a way to prevent that. But it's not easy to find such a terrific solution. But Subaru, but Emilia, there's just one method that might work. It's a method that Subaru taught me. Emilia placed her hand against her chest, and she carefully chose words that could fully convey her emotions. Hearing the words that she had spoken, Subaru searched his own heart. But, among the things Subaru had taught Emilia, as for something that could be applied to this moment, nothing came to mind. To Subaru, who had no idea what to expect, Emilia, with her gentle gaze upon him. Emilia, it's to think I want that person to be happy more than you think I will not forgive that person. Subaru, .. Emilia, for lots and lots of the people around them to think I want that person to be happy. I think that in order for us to forgive that child, it's necessary for her to make us think that way. Emilia's words slowly and gently seeped into Subaru's heart. A method to forgive bad people. A method to forgive evil deeds. A means of salvation that might lay beyond apologizing and atonement, that was the earnestly thought-out answer that Emilia had given. Whether she had learned that from something Subaru had done, or it was something he had once taught her, he had no idea. But it felt like those words had fallen firmly into Subaru's heart with a thump. Why was it that Subaru was so concerned for the sake of a Sin Archbishop, for the sake of Louis? That was because Louis had done more for Subaru than what Louis had done to him. Therefore, Anastasia, once more, let me ask you the same thing. Hearing Emilia's words and Subaru's faint sigh, Anastasia had thus spoken. While stroking Eridna, who was wrapped around her neck, she looked at Subaru and Emilia in turn, and spoke. Anastasia, in your story, what point of compromise you intend on taking? So she declared. Louis, you? As she cupped Louis's face between her hands, who was looking at her curiously, Rem let out a long, deep sigh. That reaction of Rem's caused Louis's face to look more and more puzzled as her cheeks remained cupped. From the girl's demeanor, Rem reflected that she must have caused her to worry. Even though she reflected. Rem, that's quite the sigh, Rem. Is something the matter? Rem, nay summer. Just when she gave a big sigh, a gentle voice called out from beside her. It was Ram, who had returned to their assigned passenger cabin, having prepared some tea. Behind her, She was accompanied by a girl with antlers, Tanza. Rem recalled her name to be. Noticing Rem's gaze, Ram nodded and said, "Ah." Ram, it seemed like she had nothing to do with the time on her hands, so Ram brought her along. Tanza, it is not as if I have nothing to do. Ram, really? There was a look of dissatisfaction on your face when you were kept away from the rest of those loud mouths. Even the Empire has ideas like wanting to fight to protect women and children. Ram thought they would have been more foolish. Rem, nay summer, that is a bit of an exaggeration. Rem's cheek stiffened slightly at her sister's rather blunt statement. It was still taking quite a bit of time to come to a thorough mutual understanding between herself and her sister, but even so, since the appeal from the root of her soul was honest, Rem could feel her heart stirring with every single move Ram made. Regardless, Tanza looked discontent with the way Ram had put it. Tanza, it may be true that many of the people in the battalion, especially Cecil's Summer, think about things in a simple manner, but among them are those who are as sharp-witted as the governor. Rem, I see. So, it was that sharp-witted governor who told you to stay behind? Tanza, no, it was Schwartz Summer who had told me to rest. Louis, you, at Ram's switch up, the corners of Tanza's mouth slightly stiffened as she replied. Immediately, Louis, whose cheeks were being cupped by Rem, moaned as the pressure of the hands grew stronger. Oh no, thought Rem as she apologized to Louis with an "I'm sorry. Rem, I carelessly did such a thing. Are you all right, Louis-chan?" Louis, oh. Wow? Rem, no, that has nothing to do with this. Louis, you. Her cheeks still being sandwiched, Louis cast a doubtful gaze on Rem after hearing the latter's answer. Turning away from Louis's gaze, her eyes met Ram's, who had just been serving the tea. She placed a cup of warm, fragrant tea in front of Rem. Ram, despite being a confidential dragon carriage of the Empire, it's not as well stocked with tea leaves as you'd expect. The flavor isn't anything too notable, but it will keep your body warm. Rem, tea thank you. I'll take a sip now. Ram, so? Did Barusu do something rude to you? Rem, tui, finally releasing Louis's cheeks, as soon as she put her mouth on the tea, she sputtered it out. As Rem quickly put down the cup, Louis tried to wipe her face with her own sleeve. Rem, I'm fine, Louis-chan. What is it, nay summer? Ram, nothing at all. Barusu's behavior is usually rude and inconsiderate. Even if it is guesswork, chances are high that it is the reason why Rem's face looks so gloomy. Rem, that's also a bit of an exaggeration, no matter how you say it. In other words, it was just some guesswork off of a hunch, so Rem breathed a sigh of relief as Louis wiped her face. But, that reaction was enough for the perceptive Ram to guess the reason for her sigh. Sitting cross-legged just in front of her, Ram stared at Rem as she tilted her cup. Under the pressure of that silence, Rem soon relented and confessed. Rem, about Emilia-san. Ram, Emilia Summer? Yes, Emilia Summer is also clueless and inconsiderate in some aspects, isn't she? So is that why Rem's face was so gloomy? Rem, no, that's not it. It's just. I wanted to ask what the relationship between that person, the person called Natsuki Subaru, and Emilia-san is. As the tone of her voice fell, Rem succeeded in asking her question while keeping as calm as she could. However, at this time, Rem did not realize that the very choice of topic was enough to make Ram's light crimson eyes narrow. But, her astute-looking older sister quietly muttered, I see. Ram, well, Ram ought to tear Barusu limb from limb. Let's do that together later. Rem, nay summer? Ram, it will be a sisterly collaboration. I suppose Barusu can be useful sometimes. Her faintly smiling sister possessed enchanting beauty, but her remarks were extremely disturbing. And after hearing Ram's remarks, it was Tanza who quite literally had a horn to pick. 1. She took a sip of the tea that had been brewed for her too, and though she was surprised at the taste with a wow. Tanza, Is that not a bit of an imprudent statement? Urusu. I suppose that is referring to Schwartz Summer. What, if you lay your hands on Schwartz Summer, I and the rest of the battalion will not show mercy. Ram, that's quite the courageous response. Tanza, how old are you? Tanza, dash. I will turn 12 this year. Ram, that's it. That explains it. Tanza, even though you have reached some comprehension, I am unable to understand. Rem approved of the dissatisfied Tanza's view. Why had Ram reached an understanding when she had heard Tanza's age? To begin with, was it not so that Ram had not even answered Rem's question yet? What kind of relationship does that girl Emilia have with Subaru? Rem, they were awfully close. If she were then to be asked so what? Even Rem would be unable to reply with anything but ha. But Rem did have many thoughts about how close those two were. Thus, Rem preferred to resolve this as soon as possible so she could focus on her own problems. Rem's problems, that was to say, anyway, it was Rem's problem. Rem, that's right. It's just a trivial matter that needs to be taken care of quickly so that I can face the bigger issues. Nothing more, nothing less. Rem, you got a minute? Rem, huh? With a loud jolt, Rem reflexively stood up on the spot. This caused Rem to unconsciously pick up Louis, who had been on her lap. Rem lifted Louis up, who in her surprise let out an "oh," and Rem yet again apologized to her, looking toward the door of the cabin, in the direction where she was called from. Rem, who is it? Ram, not just who, it's Barusu, the one to be torn to pieces. It seems that their discussion is over. Rem, ah. At Ram's words, as she gracefully tasted her tea, Rem let out a small sigh and hugged Louis. With an "oh"? Louis twisted her head, and Rem closed her eyes as she buried the tip of her nose into her golden hair. Just before, Rem was present when an attack was launched on the coupled dragon carriages, but afterward, she did not join the subsequent discussion where Abel had taken Subaru with a serious look on his face. Of course, there was also the fact that she would not be useful even if she got mixed up in an important conversation, and there was also the small issue that she had ascertained earlier that was still bothering her. However, the biggest reason was, Louis, you? The reason was that she had an unpleasant apprehension about the one in her arms, Louis. She did not fully know why, but Rem's heart instinctively knew that she needed to be by Louis's side. Thus, when she had shut herself in this cabin like this. Tanza, Schwartz Summer, come in. Subaru, thanks. Wait, Tanza was here too. Tanza, yes, since Schwartz Summer conspired with everyone, and forced me to stay behind. Subaru, something about the way you put it makes me feel guilty. While Rem was flustered, Tanza instead welcomed the visitor into the room. When Tanza hit him with some resentful complaints, the person who entered scratched his head in a troubled manner. Even though his stature had shrunk, the atmosphere of his troubled profile had not changed much. That was probably because even if he grew somewhat taller, the childish look of his face would not disappear. Rem, despite the mean-looking eyes, he's a strange person. Subaru, hey? Just now, did someone say something bad about my eyes? I heard you, you know? Ram, this is quite the considerable feat, to think that the complaints of the people of the Kingdom of Lagunica could be heard across the border. Subaru, there's no way the whole kingdom is talking about my eyes. They're making delightful conversation about dinner and plans for tomorrow and whatnot, I bet. Giving an exaggerated response to Ram's teasing, Subaru strode into the room with a great deal of swagger. For some reason Rem felt unable to look at Subaru, so she hid her face behind Louis, whom she was holding up with her arms, and did not face him directly. Instead, Louis took her place and spoke in wow to Subaru. Subaru, yo, Louis, I also have some business with you. Would you happen to know where Rem is? Louis, ow. Subaru, I see, so you don't know. Velp, I'm beat. Even though I had something important to tell her. Rem, dash. If it's an important matter, please don't joke around and get to the point. Subaru, whoa, Rem. So you were behind Louis? I didn't notice. Subaru forced an unnatural and exaggerated reaction when Rem interjected, but then again, his forced behavior seemed to have fooled Louis, as she shrugged her shoulders in disappointment that she could not hide Rem from him. As she lowered Louis to the floor and stroked her head to comfort her, Rem narrowed her eyes. Rem, perhaps, you're overdoing things. Subaru, Rem, I think I've said it before. Please stop overdoing things and shouldering reckless burdens like that. After all, you're not a hero who can do everything. Subaru's attitude just before seemed to be some sort of brave front, so Rem quoted the same words that she had told him in the past. Subaru's eyes widened at those words, however, he immediately smirked and said, Subaru, nah, surprisingly, I'm objectively viewed as Superman, so while I'm grateful for Rem's opinion, I'll just accept it as a cute voice. Rem, please don't joke around. Subaru, I'm not joking. Rem, I have something important to tell you about Louis. Straightening his posture, Subaru erased his smirk and said so straightforwardly. Hearing that, Rem gulped, and in her place, Ram sighed at the exchange of the two, and Ram, Barusu, shall Ram and Tanza excuse ourselves? Subaru, nah, it's fine if Nay Summer and Tanza stay. Nay Summer can be the representative of the big sister division, and Tanza can be the representative of the lowly division. Ram, you are saying Ram is superior to Frederica as an older sister. Naturally. Tanza, what do you mean by lolly division? Requested to be present, Ram puffed out her chest and Tanza cocked her head. Then, Rem gently pulled Louis closer as Subaru turned his gaze towards them again. Holding the back of Louis's head to her chest, Rem fixed her eyes on Subaru. And then, Subaru, let's resolve it. This lovely relationship between us, that we don't really understand. Arc 8, Chapter 23, Louis. Truly, their relationship had been a peculiar one, Natsuki Subaru thought. Perhaps rather than peculiar, it ought to be called a malignant providence that had guided Subaru and his companions thus far. Their ideologies, their ways, he despised absolutely all of it with every fiber of his being, the Wallachian Empire. The one who had given him the unbearable yearning to cry his heart out for reasons he did not understand, bereft of her memories, Rem. The one he had cast the entirety of the blame upon, who he had utterly loathed, the sin Archbishop of Gluttony, Louis Arneb. Served with a situation he could not help but curse, lamenting and raging in accordance with the path that had been laid out for him, while he repeatedly continued to crash, Subaru had been able to survive through these days by dying over and over again. Here, there were also people who he had made contact with, who had helped him, and he had helped, the Wallachian Empire. He was together with the one whose kindness and deep thoughtfulness made him yearn to weep, bereft of her memories, Rem. The one who had risked her life time and time again, bravely devoting herself to him, the sin Archbishop of Gluttony, Louis Arneb, processing the curse that had been served to him, refusing to follow the path that had been laid out for him, while they continued to gently hurt each other. Subaru had been able to survive through these days by dying over and over again. Was it malediction, grief, or hatred? Or perhaps, without cursing, without grieving, it could be forgiveness? The time had come to resolve this relationship, which up till now had continued to remain ambiguous. Subaru, Subaru's declaration upon entering the passenger cabin cloaked the space with an air of tension. Present in the room were Rem and Louis, joined by Ram and Tanza, totaling 4. The former two were directly concerned in the matter, the latter two, witnesses. Subaru desired to converse with them. Emilia, Beatrice, and the rest were waiting for the resolution. Regardless of the form Natsuki Subaru's answer would take, they were waiting. Rem, has the important discussion with Abel-san concluded? Before Subaru, who had been considering how to broach the subject, Rem was the first to speak. Seated beside Louis, with her hand in hers, Rem's words, whether she was conscious of it or not, seemed like an attempt to keep things in check. In response to her question, Subaru shook his head. Subaru, it's paused for now. That discussion can't proceed until we've resolved our own matters. The discussion with Abel also involves Louis. Louis, you? Rem, why is Louis-chan involved? Subaru, it's because according to the prophecy of the Stargazer guy, Louis' presence is crucial for us to win this battle. Rem, HK. As Subaru presented the prerequisite without concealing anything, a bitter expression crossed Rem's face. Holding Louis' hand, Rem looked at Subaru with her pale blue eyes and said, so that means. Rem, you're saying that you're going to make Louis-chan fight? Despite her being so small, just a child who doesn't understand anything, you're suggesting such a cruel thing. Subaru, whether she needs to fight or not is a question for later, but let me clarify something first. The notion that Louis is just a kid who doesn't understand anything is a mistaken one. Rem, what do you? Subaru, even though communicating with words is difficult, Louis clearly understands the situation she's in. She chooses who she wants to side with, and who she doesn't. Knowing that, she is here with us. Rem, that's HK. At Subaru's calm words, Rem lowered her head, speechless. Rem, too, understood that Subaru's objection was the truth. If it were not so, Louis would not be here in the first place. From the moment she had been cast into the Wallachian Empire, she was in an incomprehensible situation. She acted like a clingy child, imprinting herself onto the first people she encountered, Subaru and Rem. However, such an explanation could not account for the myriad of brutal trials that they had surmounted together. If the imprinting was not a sign of love, but rather a manifestation of a defensive instinct seeking a protector in order to survive, it would go without saying that being together with Subaru and Rem was detrimental to Louis' survival. If she merely wanted to survive, it would have been easier for Louis had she not been with Subaru and his companions. Ram, on that point, Ram agrees with Barusu. Although only bits and pieces of the situation have been heard from Rem, that child being here, despite having been separated from both Rem and Barusu, is a result of her own choosing. Rem, nay summer. Ram, don't misunderstand, Rem. Ram is entirely on Rem's side and has resolved in her heart to tear Barusu apart together with you later, but she won't twist the truth. Subaru, there was one part of that declaration that I can't ignore, but thank you. With a feeling somewhere between gratitude and bitterness, Subaru thanked Ram, who had interjected. To Subaru, that too felt like an attempt to keep things in check from Ram's side. At the same time, it was an indication that Ram would be impartial in this conversation and had no intention of emotionally siding with Rem. That was exactly in line with the way that Rem used to often describe her assessment of Ram's behavior. Subaru, nay summer, is far too kind. Huh? Whether those words murmured within his mouth could be heard or not, Ram snorted without giving any words, then crossed her slender legs and brought her cup of tea to her lips. Beside her, Tanza, who seemed to have been somewhat bored, looked at Subaru with her dark eyes, and Tanza, similar to Ram Summer, I also shall not support Schwartz Summer. I am unable to gauge the situation, so please do not be mistaken if you are intending to make me an ally here. Subaru, I know. Tanza is being reliably strict with me. I didn't think you'd take my side anyway. Tanza, Subaru, huh? That seemed to have upset you a little. Why? Having followed Ram's lead and declared her status as an impartial witness, Tanza's expression became a bit sulky. Tanza's expression rarely changed, but this sullen face was relatively common. Most of the time, it popped up in response to Cecilus's unreasonable words and actions, or when Hyan said too much. Also, it was quite frequently directed towards Subaru. Nevertheless, thanks to Ram and Tanza stating their positions, he had finished mentally preparing himself. With that, Subaru once again turned to face his main focus, Rem and Louis. And then, Subaru, Louis, we're about to discuss something important. It's about you, and I won't conceal any of what I feel within my heart of hearts. Will you listen, without running away? Louis, you. Subaru, I see. You're a good girl. Thank you. After a moment's hesitation, Louis nodded with a lively voice. That reaction was yet another piece of evidence that she had a good understanding of what Subaru and the others around her were talking about. Rem, avoiding any eye contact, glanced at Louis's profile. Therein, Rem was hoping to see the emotions she desired. If Louis would show even the slightest sign of discomfort, she could use that as a reason to stop the conversation. But, in Louis's profile, she had been unable to find a reason to do so. Subaru, Rem, Louis, I think both of you have realized that from the start, I was always really wary of Louis, and that I always shunned her. And that I had always hated her. Rem, Subaru, the reason for Rem being so excessively suspicious of me at first, that was the main source. When I tried to somehow separate the two of you, I even got my fingers broken. Rem, about that time. I also went too far. Subaru, it's fine. Looking back, it's just another good memory between me and Rem. Rem, huh? Subaru flexed the fingers of his left hand as he answered, and Rem made a face as if doubting his sanity. Not only Rem, but Ram and Tanza too made similar faces, so despite the topic being broken fingers, Subaru changed the subject by saying, anyway before his heart could be broken. Subaru, I was actively wary of Louis. And so, Rem was actively suspicious of me. I don't know how Louis was feeling, but you must have felt that tense atmosphere, right? Louis, you? Subaru, even after we got separated at one point and later were reunited with all the Shadrakians, even after we retreated from Garrel, and after that around the time of the siege of Garrel, it had always been like that. Because of that, the gap between Subaru and Rem kept getting wider and wider, making it difficult to fill. As for the reasons Subaru had felt hatred for Louis, the fact that her existence caused his relationship with Rem to worsen was something that undoubtedly had a great influence. His animosity towards Louis only began to change after they arrived at the demon city of Chaos Flame, having separated from Rem. While spending time with Louis without Rem as a mediator, she had worked her hardest to protect Subaru, and little by little, Subaru had no choice but to acknowledge that. That was why, after they had split in the demon city, and he was reunited with Beatrice at the imperial capital, he had been honestly happy that Louis was also there. At that point, none of the animosity that he had from the beginning remained. Subaru, if we just stayed like that, continuing to go on without thinking too much about it, I think it definitely would have been easier. But, that's just not possible. It's the same as a wound. Some wounds will heal if left alone, while others will only get worse. This is a wound that we can't just leave alone. In order for the wound to heal, it needed to be treated. And, for treatment, one could not just rely on magic or medicine. In some cases, more daring methods had to be used. Thus, this was a wound of the sort where they had no choice but to resort to such means. Therefore, Subaru, up to now, I've never once said it. The reason, Louis, why I hated you. Louis, wow. Staring into those blue eyes, Subaru poured out his feelings. As if responding to Subaru's serious gaze and tone of voice, Louis did not avert her gaze either. This girl had resolved herself to accept whatever he might say. Instead, Rem, please stop. Biting her lip, it was Rem who spoke in such a trembling voice. In a voice that trembled as if she was pleading, she remained holding Louis's hand as she spoke. No, that was wrong. It was not that. The one with their hand being held, was not Louis. It was Rem. It was Rem whose hand was being held by Louis, that much was clear. Rem, I don't want to hear it. The reason that you hated Louis-chan, I don't care about such a thing. Isn't it fine to just think that you were cold-hearted? Weakly shaking her head in refusal, Rem rejected Subaru's words. Stopping herself from putting pressure on Louis's hand by instead clenching her other hand so tightly that her bones creaked, Rem tried to refuse what came next. He wanted to respect those feelings of Rem's. He wanted to grant all of Rem's wishes. Subaru, I'm sorry. I won't let you plug your ears on this matter. But he must not do so. Neither could he fulfill Rem's wishes, nor could he show them respect. If she did not want to listen, her only option was to flee this room. Subaru had no right to stop Rem if that was what she truly wanted to do. However, Rem also understood that plugging her ears to Subaru's words here would be tantamount to turning her back on her own missing memories, and Rem, and it also would mean betraying the feelings of Ram, who was silently watching over her. Rem, even so, I don't want it. I don't want to hear it. HK. Clenching her eyes shut and gritting her teeth, Rem chose to not run away from here. However, she felt a very, very strong urge to refuse Subaru's next words. While struck by her words, Subaru, again, kept his eyes fixed on Louis. Louis, wow. Louis's lips moved, indeed, she voiced a sound that did not form a coherent word. That sound, he understood perfectly well that it was calling out his name, Subaru. And because he understood that, Subaru, Louis, the reason why I hated you, why I detested you, is Rem, stop. HK. Subaru, because you are the one responsible for stealing Rem's memories, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony. Because he understood that, Subaru had no choice but to respond. He had said it. At last, he had finally said it, the words that had always been left unspoken. The moment he told her, there were no deep emotions of a secret being laid bare, no heartbreaking sensation of a detestable individual being condemned. Even now, as he revealed that which had been bottled up in his heart, there was naught but anguish of intensified weight and anguish. And it only got worse with the developments that followed thereafter. Rem, wah-ah. Her voice raised, her face grimacing, Rem's hands reached towards him. Her hands seized Subaru's collar, and with tremendous force, pushed him down onto the ground. He was unable to offer any resistance, as she was positioned on top of his body. He probably would not have been able to do so even if his body had not become smaller, but now that he was smaller, it was especially true. If Rem were to have put all her strength into her arms, she would have easily been able to cover Subaru's mouth. Yet, until those definitive words were spoken, Rem had done no such thing. Even now, in this moment as she was mounted atop Subaru. Rem, why? Just why? HK. Her voice strained, her face contorting with fury, she scowled at Subaru's face at a distance so close that he could feel her breath, but still she did not utilize all the strength in her arms. Her emotions were bursting out, but even so, Rem remained rational before crossing the final line. Subaru, feeling Rem's hot breath on his face, Subaru stretched out his hand to restrain the bystanders. At the moment that Subaru was pushed down, Tanza immediately attempted to move to protect Subaru. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see that Ram was holding Tanza back by the arm. From Subaru's side, too, he appealed to the two, indicating that they had done enough, and looked back at Rem, who was in front of him. Drop by drop, tears streaked from Rem's pale blue eyes and fell upon Subaru's cheeks. Her eyes housed neither anger nor sadness, but rather were intensely brimming with frustration, and the reason why she had maintained her rationality and opted not to cross that last line. That was what was embodied in her tears. That was, Rem, even without you telling me, I could tell. That Louis Chan, that she had something to do with the memories that I couldn't remember, I knew that. Subaru, Rem. Rem, after all, what else could it have been? The only reason why you were so cruel to Louis Chan, trying to keep her away from me over and over again, was because you thought I would be in danger if I stayed with her. There couldn't be any other reason, could there? HK, her breath, her voice, her eyes, all of them trembling feebly, Rem poured her heart out. Upon being told this, Subaru shut his eyes. It was only natural. Indeed, it was none other than Rem who was the victim of these lost memories. The thought that Rem herself could be less concerned about her own memories than Subaru and everyone else, such an absurd notion could absolutely never be the case. It was natural that more than anyone else, she would have been in anguish, longing for the whereabouts of her own memories. Rem, I'm well aware. Do you think I'm stupid? Maybe I am stupid. I'm just a stupid woman who doesn't know anything. After all, I don't know anything about you. And I don't even want to. And yet you just barge right in. I hate you. Subaru, Rem, you are nothing compared to Louis-chan. Louis-chan has always stayed beside me, she's always cared about me. She is, Louis-chan, is my. Those endless streams of tears not only hit Subaru's cheeks, but they also ran down Rem's cheeks and chin, embellishing her body and heart with teardrops, disguising them. She knew, but she still wished that she did not. Rem, everything, all of it has to be some kind of mistake. All of it is your lies. Subaru, Rem. Feebly, Rem's eyes welled up with tears, and when a large teardrop fell, her blurred vision must have been temporarily cleared, for she could see Subaru's face right before her. Subaru, pinned down as he was, gently cupped Rem's face between his hands, and fixed her gaze on himself. Black and blue eyes met, and Subaru spoke to her lovely face, soaked with tears as it was. Subaru, it's not a lie. Everything you thought, Rem, was true. Louis was our enemy. Rem, what do you mean, enemy? Is it because of what she did to me, to my memories? If so, then. With a strong shake of her head, Rem raised herself up as she left Subaru's hands. As it was, she turned toward Louis, who remained standing in her initial position. Rem, then, I'll forgive Louis-chan. I'll forgive her, so isn't that enough? See, with that, everything will be solved, won't it? Subaru, no, that's not enough. That doesn't solve anything. Rem, why? Subaru, because I will never forgive Louis for the pain she caused you. Her voice cracking, Rem said she would forgive Louis, to which Subaru thus declared. Hearing Subaru's words, Rem's eyes widened, letting out a hoarse breath. Suddenly, Rem's body lost its strength, and Subaru slowly raised himself up. Rem, still on top of Subaru's body, stood up and exchanged glances at close range. Subaru, it's not just me. It's Ram, it's everyone else, it's everybody who cares about you, Rem. They won't forgive Louis. No matter how much you say you forgive her. Rem, that's just. Subaru, besides, Rem. The things Louis did, they weren't all to just you. Many more people are suffering from gluttony's wrongdoings because of the things Louis did. Even if Rem really forgave Louis, even if she forgave her out of compassion and not out of impulse, there were many more Rems in this world who could not forgive Louis. So long as those people were not saved, Rem's desperate plea would never come to fruition. Rem, many others? Subaru, yeah. To an outrageous extent. So many people are suffering. Rem, well, there's nothing that can be done about it, right? Subaru, Rem, from the very beginning, there was nothing that could be done, that's the sort of issue this is, right? You're saying that there's nothing that can be done. Is that the resolution you were speaking of? Her lips trembling, more large tears began to well up in Rem's eyes. In a manner likely more intense than how she anguished over her own memories, Rem wept for Louis. That she wanted to save Louis regardless of her own memories, that she truly desired to save her, in accordance with how emotional she had gotten, Rem's lips trembled. She wept. Those tears, that trembling voice, both caused Subaru to feel the pain of being torn apart. Subaru, I'm sorry, it must feel like I'm messing with you. Rem, please, don't apologize. Subaru, but, I'm sorry. This whole time, I've only been saying things that are hard and painful for you, Rem. Rem, like I said, please don't apologize. HK. I don't want to hear it. Subaru, I'm sorry, but you have to listen to me. Rem, like I said. HK. Subaru, I don't want to give up. I don't want to continue being unable to forgive Louis. Rem, huh? A gasp escaped from Rem's throat, and her eyes opened wide. Facing Rem, Subaru took in a deep breath and licked his lips. Word by word, he ensured that his thoughts, exactly as he had intended them, were fully conveyed to the girls who he wanted to hear them. Subaru, I'm the same as you, Rem. I want to forgive Louis. I don't want to continue being unable to forgive her. But I can't. After all, Rem is really important to me. Rem, HK. Subaru, that's why, I won't forgive Louis for the terrible things that she did to you, for taking away your memories, and for causing you to still suffer like this. Rem, gently reaching out, Subaru wiped a tear from Rem's cheek with his finger. By the time he wiped off that single droplet, many more teardrops had already moistened Rem's cheeks. Even so, Rem did not break Subaru's finger. It was as if to say he had not been denied, thus Subaru continued to speak. Subaru, everybody really let me have it. They scolded me a whole lot, telling me not to say or think such stupid things. I think Otto probably still thinks things would work out better if Louis were dead. But that was surely the natural mindset. This was not to say that it was a self-purification process, but everyone knew in their hearts that it had to happen. Even Subaru knew it in his mind, and that was why he strongly faced strong opposition. However, Subaru, Julius told me. He's an incredible guy. On the other hand, he might be an idiot. He's as much a victim as you are, Rem, but he shouldn't say those things like they're normal. He's an idiot. Rem, Subaru, I've been told lots of things by smart people, by stupid people. Tons of things by cool people, by kind people, by amazing people, and I've thought about it a whole lot, and I've decided. My point of compromise. Rem, point of compromise. Subaru, I want to believe in Louis. I want to forgive her. But I won't forgive her right now. So, as he voiced his thoughts, watching Rem's eyes waver in front of him, the words of a certain man passed through Subaru's mind. How could I go along with someone who decides who lives or dies based on his own fickle whims? The words of a man, with whom Natsuki Subaru had been incompatible, clawed painfully at his soul. He was told that his attitude of deciding to forgive or not based on his own fickle whims was not something worthy of trust. There was no doubt that those words were correct. That which was the least reliable was Subaru's own heart. Even so, it was a matter of reaching a compromise with this heart, something that he could not yield to anybody else, and proceeding onward. So easily moved, so quick to come around, with this fragile and pathetic soul of his, he would reach a compromise. Rem, Subaru hugged Rem tightly, who was surprised by his words and unable to move. Despite the difference in height, Subaru pulled himself out from under her body and embraced the slumped over Rem's head to his stomach. Subaru wished to convey that he truly cared about Rem from the bottom of his heart. And then, Louis, wow. At the sound of that voice calling his name, Subaru looked at Louis. Parted from Rem's hand, Louis had been standing still, and knowing that it was now her turn, she called out to Subaru. Louis, you. Witnessing how forlorn Louis appeared as she stood, Rem, still in Subaru's embrace, let out an ah and hurriedly stood up. Then, as Rem hugged Louis from the front. Rem, I'm sorry, Louis-chan. We, on our own. Louis, oh, wow, oh. Rem, I'm sorry. HK. With a feeble apology, Rem wiped her face with her sleeve, then stood up beside Louis. Once again, she tightly squeezed Louis's hand, however, this time it was with a face that did not rely upon her. He felt just a little bit envious of Louis, who was able to move Rem's heart like that. In addition to that, Subaru, Louis, do you still want to become me? Louis, you? Rem, what are you saying? Seemingly not understanding the meaning behind Subaru's question, the two of them tilted their heads together. Indeed, they had both tilted their heads. Not only Rem, Louis had too. Louis had too. Subaru, as I told you earlier, Rem. Even if you forgive Louis, I won't forgive her. The many other people who have suffered harm due to gluttony won't forgive Louis either. But. Rem, but. Subaru, but. Louis, I want to forgive you. If I was able to forgive you, that's what I would want to do. So, let me ask you this. Firmly, conscious to not let his voice waver, Subaru looked straight at Louis. He saw Rem squeeze Louis's hand, and Louis squeezed it back. While he hoped that this would be the answer to the relationship between the two, Subaru, are you a sin archbishop? Or, is it possible? Louis, Subaru, it's been said to me a lot. And, I agree. The world will not forgive the sin archbishops, and it must not forgive them. The sin archbishop of gluttony, Louis Arneb, is a being who must not be forgiven. Louis, Subaru, but, you helped me. You protected me over and over again. You didn't even know that you once wanted to become me. You're completely different to the Louis Arneb that I knew. Still, you can use the authority of gluttony. You possess a witch factor. That was Subaru's full impression of Louis from the time he had spent with her thus far. She was of the same appearance as the sin archbishop, Louis Arneb, whom he had encountered in the Hall of Memories, and even though she possessed the same authority, she did not seem to be the same person. That was just like Natsuki Subaru from some time ago, and Rem, who was like this now. Someone who, while being the same, was different, someone who could make that choice of their own will, to be the same, or to be different. To that Louis, he wished to ask. Subaru, are you a sin archbishop that no one in this world can ever forgive? Or, is it possible that you might be able to take back what the sin archbishop has done? Louis, you. Subaru, can you, start your life anew? What if, just what if? What if the situation that Louis had been placed in was the same as that of Natsuki Subaru and Rem? Then, Subaru was asking a terribly cruel and unfair question. Having no memories, having no clue as to what was happening, the hardship of being burdened by the self that one is not, Subaru was keenly aware of those feelings. Rem, too, knew them well. And now, he was trying to force those same things upon Louis like this. However, Subaru, if you can do that, if that is what you desire, then take my hand. As he said this, Subaru slowly held out his hand to Louis. Louis's eyes traced back and forth between Subaru's face and the proffered hand. Similarly, as Rem held her breath next to her, her gaze shifted between Subaru's eyes and hand. Subaru, Louis, a lot of people curse you the same way that I do. I can't speak for all of their feelings. But, I can just say one thing. Louis, Subaru, I don't know what you would need to do to get everyone to forgive you. It's just what you need to do for me to forgive you, I can tell you that. Before he had come here, before he had been permitted this time, Emilia had told him. Emilia had said it was something Subaru had taught her, but that was unthinkable. After all, Subaru was always learning from everyone else. He did not even know how to resolve his own feelings without being taught how to do so. Questions like, why did Subaru want to forgive Louis? And, how could Subaru be able to forgive Louis? All of it. Thus, the way to reach the point of compromise, was Subaru, Louis, save lots of people. Louis, Subaru, right now, you're going through unreasonable circumstances. I know that without any memory, you're being forced to bear an outrageously unreasonable cross. Even so. Taking a deep breath, with unwavering eyes his gaze fell upon Louis, he told her. Subaru, you can help lots of people. Louis, Subaru, if you help and keep helping, continuing to help more than you've stolen. At least I, and I alone, will be on your side. The things you've done won't ever disappear. That was what Anastasia had said to him once in the past, and then again just before, a statement that froze Subaru in his tracks. Now, Subaru found those words no different to traumatic advice that there were some things that even his return by death was unable to overturn. However, when Anastasia had made that statement, she had also said, Subaru, if you want people to believe you're doing the right thing, You have no choice but to show them something that backs that up. The only way to change their appraisal is to overturn it with a different one. That was the most important part of the traumatic advice that Subaru had received. The fact that Subaru was offering his hand to Louis like this now was also because through her actions, she had overturned the animosity Subaru harbored towards her. That change of heart that had happened to Subaru would happen to all the people who suffered from the damage of gluttony. That was Subaru, that's the from zero I'm offering you. Not just from zero, but on a worldwide scale, she had no choice but to start from the negatives. Facing such an absurd, outrageous, and tremendously nonsensical challenge, it was grandly delusional reasoning, for who in their right mind would believe that such a thing could be accomplished? But that was the best that Subaru could offer. So then, if facing this absurd, outrageous, and tremendously nonsensical challenge was a grandly delusional reasoning that nobody in their right mind would believe could be accomplished, Subaru would lend his aid. In the same way that it had once been done for none other than Natsuki Subaru in the past, Louis, hand outstretched, Subaru remained still, awaiting an answer to come. He did not rush her. Nor could he wait forever. He was giving her the time she needed, and quietly awaited the needed answer. I don't know. During that stillness, beside the silent Subaru and Louis, Rem muttered. For but a moment, it seemed as if that statement meant that she did not comply with Subaru's proposal. However, Rem's eyes said otherwise. She continued. Rem, about the ones called Sin Archbishops, about the name Louis Arneb, all of it. Subaru, Rem, but, if those so-called Sin Archbishops, and also this Louis Arneb person, if their existence is not forgiven in this world, then what will this child become? Her voice trembled. But her pale blue eyes were not filled with tears. As if to say that with a blurred and moist vision, neither would she be able to see the answer she coveted, nor the answer the other person presented. Rem's eyes were direct, to be neither a Sin Archbishop, nor Louis Arneb. If such was her choosing, what would she become? As Louis, she would bear many unreasonable burdens, and walk a path seeking forgiveness, unaware of whether it truly existed on the other side of it all. Such a girl, just who would she become? When proffered this question, all Subaru could say was, Subaru, Spica. Rem, huh? Subaru, to this girl, starting over as a new self, with a new way of life, I bestow this name. Rem's eyes widened, and Louis's eyes followed suit. If she chose to live in a different way to how she had lived thus far, and set her sights on a completely different future from now on, Subaru intended to do everything he could to support her. Because, in a world where nobody would forgive a Sin Archbishop, in a world where nobody would forgive Louis Arneb, he still wanted to forgive the girl who stood before him from the bottom of his heart. So that Subaru could forgive the girl, he wished for her to become such a person. Thus, Rem, Spica. Stunned, dumbfounded, Rem uttered the name, then looked to her side. The young girl fixed her eyes on Subaru. He, too, looked at her without averting his eyes. He wanted things to be like this, such was his wish. But, if he spoke it out loud, the girl would surely do so. Not of her own wishes, but because she respected Subaru's, thus, he would not say it. Because he wanted her to choose for herself, and not for anyone else. He wanted her to walk and keep walking, so that when she looked back at the path she had walked, she would be able to think that it was a path that she had chosen to walk. Louis, wow. Subaru, The girl's thin lips moved. Subaru's name was called out gently. Silent and still, Subaru waited. He did not want to rush her. Nor could he wait forever. He had given her the time she needed, and she had chosen what was needed. He wanted to hear her answer. Then, as Subaru desperately tried to contain himself, the girl's expression changed. Louis, wow. Gentle and tender, words were spun, and a smile emerged. Then, as tears trickled down from the corners of her blue eyes, the girl's hand softly grasped the hand Subaru had held out. Welcoming that light, soft touch, Subaru clenched his eyes shut. To be neither a Sin Archbishop, nor Louis Arneb, a new way of life. Having been a Sin Archbishop, having been Louis Arneb, a past that could not be erased. Taking that upon herself, she would need to walk a thorny path. The girl, Spica, he held her hand so tightly and firmly, as if to never let go. Subaru, one day, I want to forgive you. So, let's do our best together. Spica, oh. Flashing her white teeth, Spica gave a wide grin with her tearful face. Having witnessed that smile of Spica's from the side, Rem's emotions swelled up inside of her, and burst forth. Rem, HK. With more passion and more tears than ever before, Rem embraced Spica. Embracing her, cradling her, wailing her heart out, Rem cried. Startled by the embrace, Spica was drawn in by Rem's emotions, and as her expression clouded over and scrunched up. Spica, ow. Spica, too, with a loud voice, her face scrunching up, in a manner befitting her age, while shouldering a destiny that someone of her age should never have to, she burst into tears. Just like how any other being who was newly born into this world would. Wailing like newborn babies, the girls kept crying. They just kept crying. Subaru, also, cried a little. Arc 8, Chapter 24, To Walk in the Light. Spica, oh. Subaru, as expected, that's asking too much. Peeking over the shoulder of Rem's embrace, Spica shook her head apologetically. She was opening and closing both her hands, but it did not seem easy to freely control her authority and return that which the gluttonies had collected. Rem, are you sure that Louis-chan? No, Spica-chan, can do this. Can Spica-chan bring back mine and other people's missing memories? Subaru, at least, Spica is the one with the highest chance. Being able to do that is the minimum requirement. That in itself is already a different matter from what the Stargazer talked about. Rem was worried, but that was something that Spica would need to be able to do. This was the essential condition needed for Spica to walk while bearing the cross of Louis on her shoulders. To that end, Spica needed to master the use of the authority of gluttony. Subaru, Rem, A momentary, fleeting anxiety shut down her words and made Rem's eyes waver. The generosity exhibited by Ram, the conditions necessary to undertake that, knowing the means that must be achieved in order to do so, the authority's very existence was dreadful. It was dreadful that in order to become something that was not the unforgivable Sin Archbishop, the authority utilized by the Sin Archbishop would continue to be used, and Spica's way of life would once again draw closer to that of Louis Arneb. To keep Spica alive, meant to continue fighting against that fear. With that resolve settled. Subaru, I'll have you do it, I'm counting on you, Spica. Spica, you. Wow. With definite determination housed within her blue eyes, Spica nodded vigorously at Subaru's words. Though Spica and the villainous Louis Arneb shared an appearance, their innermost feelings did not overlap. That was a hope that could certainly be believed in. Subaru, Tanza, I'm sorry I didn't take your advice. Tanza, do you expect me to just smile and forgive you, saying it is something that always happens? Taking his eyes off Rem and Spica, Subaru turned back towards Tanza. The tone of Subaru's voice worsened, and Tanza responded in a voice stiff in emotions. At that response, Subaru shrugged his shoulders with a no. Subaru, I don't expect that. After all, you rarely smile at me. Tanza, that is not what I. Subaru, I do know what you mean. But, give me a break. Tanza, if that is what you want, there must be countless methods to choose from. Why not just say that her power is for the sake of the Volakian Empire and, by extension, for Yorna Summer's salvation? Tightly pursing her lips, Tanza vehemently argued so to Subaru. Regardless of the authenticity of the Stargazer's prophecy, if attention was drawn to the fact that Spica's presence was essential to this battle, then Tanza would not be able to say no with Yorna's life on the line. But, Subaru did not like that approach. Subaru, I could probably get Tanza to do as I say using that unfair tactic, but I don't like that idea. I don't want to use any unfair methods on anyone. You're one person who I feel that especially strongly about. Tanza, dash. In that case, it is impossible for Schwartz Summer. Tanza finally turned away from Subaru, hugging her own thin arms. Confronted face to face with gestures and words regarding his cowardice, Subaru let out a long sigh. The things Subaru wanted to do were always a path that would do nothing but hurt the people around him, the people who cared about Subaru. Ram, well. How well did the unfair and cowardly Barusu play his cards out there? Subaru gave a wry smile at the way Ram phrased it. Ram was kind for not letting Subaru's self-mockery be replaced with self-satisfaction in this way. Although he really wished that he could have played his cards as well as Ram put it. Subaru, I didn't do anything so perfectly. I had the means to do it over until I did it perfectly, but... For example, at the Gladiator Island, Subaru had been able to do that without hesitation. Whenever he went down a mistaken path, or progressed into an undesired relationship, he gave it another go using a method to recover from those mistakes, with an assertiveness to just keep repeating in a cycle of trial and error. Subaru, but, now that I'm reunited with everyone, I don't want to do that. As he said this, Subaru slid his tongue around inside his mouth, that which had been stored there for an awfully long time, the drug cartridge hidden behind his molar. Ascertaining that he did not feel that package of poison, he closed his eyes. Even if he did resort to that method again, he would never use it in order to avert his eyes from mistakes in his relationships, and precisely because he had firmly decided that in his heart. Subaru, after all, Otto also punched me really hard. That even if the path he trod would force him to make sacrifices, he must not repeat it. Garfield, Otto bro, show me your hand, and I'll fix it up. Upon hearing this, Otto turned to face Garfield, who stood in front of him. This rough-looking boy, despite his rugged exterior, had a very delicate nature. He was considerate and kind-hearted, truly embodying the essence of a member of the Emilia camp. In response to Garfield's offer, Otto shook his head and replied, Otto, there is no need to be so concerned. It is not that serious. Garfield, Otto bro, that ain't like ya. Otto, dash dash. Garfield, you know, it ain't like my amazing self don't have my own thoughts and feelings. So, I kinda understand how you must feel. Garfield scratched his head and closed one of his eyes. Then, he gestured toward Otto's hand with a jerk of his chin. It was a painful sight, Otto's right hand, which was swollen and bruised. For a moment, Otto tried to turn away, to hide his hand from view, but it was foolish to think that he could do so in front of his sworn younger brother who was a skilled warrior. Above all, Garfield, you ain't planning on going into an important battle with that untreated hand, are ya bro? Otto, with you saying that, I really cannot argue, can I? With a wry smile, conceding to the reasonable persuasion, Otto extended his bruised right hand. The dark, swollen fist throbbed with pain. From the sensations that he had accumulated over the more than 2 decades of his life, Otto was pretty sure that the bones in his fist were broken. If anything, thinking so only intensified the pain. Whether it was broken or not, it sure felt like it was broken. Garfield, this feels like the timid Domus is the first to die on the battlefield. Otto, did that not mean that someone who is usually timid going all out on the battlefield and dying a pointless death? Garfield, well, I wouldn't exactly associate timid with ya, Otto bro. As he spoke, Garfield gently grasped the offered hand and cast a healing spell. A sensation like being gently warmed by hot water enveloped his hand along with a faint light. In just a few seconds, the pain in Otto's fist had subsided. Garfield, it's freshly healed, so if you're gonna punch again, use your left. Otto, I do not want to break both hands. I will leave the next punch to you, Garfield. Garfield, if my amazing self did it, there'd be a massive hole, wouldn't there? It's only 'cause of your strength that it stopped at that, you know? With a gritting of teeth, Garfield turned his head, sending his gaze towards the wall of the carriage. Indeed, just as Garfield had said, there was a slight indentation and a crack in the wall. That mark was made by Otto's fist, and the height of that mark, Garfield, is right around our shrunken captain's head, huh? Otto, it is fortunate of Natsuki-san that he was small at that time. If I had punched him in that state, no matter the explanation, I would have come across as the villain. Garfield, no doubt about that. Well, if the captain were his usual size, after you were done, I might have taken a swing myself. Garfield chuckled at Otto's light-hearted remark. Seeing Garfield's reaction, the corner of Otto's mouth twitched into a smile. Oh, honestly, he muttered, scratching his head with his right hand that had just healed. His freshly healed right hand still hurt when he handled it roughly. But the pain was reassuring. Otto, simple as it may be, pain can be therapeutic. Oh, maybe I should have just gone ahead and punched Natsuki-san regardless of his size after all. Garfield, if that's what you're thinking, wanna go give him a smack together now? Otto, no thank you. If we go now, we will see something we would rather not. Garfield, trying his best to be comforting, groaned with a low growl, struggling for words upon hearing Otto's response. Even though he had not intended to, Otto reflected on his words, feeling as though he had unfairly lashed out. But did he really have no such intention? Could he confidently say that he had not aimed those sharp words at Garfield, who was always looking out for his best interests, fully knowing that he would never turn against him? Otto, this is frustrating. Muttering to himself, Otto, once again, smacked his forehead with his right hand, a bit harder this time. The forehead that was smacked and the right hand that smacked it both cried out in pain. Presently, Subaru had headed towards the cabin where Ram and Rem were waiting. There, he was expected to confront Louis and engage in a conversation. The topic likely to be discussed there was something that Otto, from the bottom of his heart, did not want happening. He could loudly declare that he absolutely did not want to be present for it. Emilia and Beatrice, more worried about Subaru himself than the nature of the conversation, had followed him. Whether they would enter the cabin or not remained uncertain, but he could easily imagine them anxiously awaiting the outcome. However, considering the circumstances, Garfield, with his awkward expression and silence, probably had stayed here out of concern for Otto. Emilia, Beatrice, and Garfield all had a way of making Otto's heart sour. Otto's stance on the sin Archbishop of Gluttony, Louis Arneb, had consistently been that she must be eliminated at all costs. Because he believed this and had strongly resolved himself to it, there was a fact that Otto had deliberately not shared with Emilia and the others. Since their reunion in the fortress city of Garrel, and through several encounters with Louis, the girl who was unable to speak, his ears had never once picked up on any malice from her. Otto's divine protection of the soul of language had a simple function, one that enabled him to communicate with any living being, and only that. While he had most frequently used it to exchange words with ground dragons or insects in order to gather information, if Otto so wished, he could even communicate with an infant. There was a time during his difficult days as a traveling merchant, when he had taken on the task of looking after the infants of influential figures in various lands, simply to earn some money for his traveling expenses. Even though an infant's voice might not be able to form words, Otto could understand the underlying intention. In the same vein, while the utterances of Louis might not have formed coherent speech, Otto was able to discern her intentions. And within them, he found no malice toward others. Instead, her affection towards Subaru and Rem had made up the most of it. That was why Otto had placed a lid over this certain truth and never told Emilia or the others about it. As long as doubts were harbored, he could prevent them from getting too close to Louis. Once those doubts were dispelled, it was needless to say what kind of attitude the kind-hearted Emilia and others would display towards Louis or how they would approach her in terms of emotional distance. That would? Otto-kun, Garf-kun, mind if I have a word? Otto, with a light knock-knock on the cabin door, peeping in was Anastasia, clad in a kimono. Upon seeing her, who had brought Julius beside her in a similar fashion, Otto tightened his cheeks and gave a nod, signaling yes. Anastasia, it seemed like things over there were gonna take a while, and I thought it might be a bit much for all of us to wait together. I was also worried about Otto Kuhn's hand. Garfield, even without your worries, I already healed bro's hand. Besides. Anastasia, Garfield, I ain't comfortable with you calling me Garf Kuhn. Garfield voiced his grievance while crinkling up his nose, to which Anastasia widened her eyes in surprise. She then chuckled, sorry about that, and said, Anastasia, you see, Mimi's always calling you Garf and talking 'bout you like that, so I just got used to thinking of you as Garf Kuhn. Is Garf Kuhn not okay? Garfield, not that it ain't okay, but. Otto, Garfield, there is no need to fuss. While Garfield reluctantly stood his ground against Anastasia, Otto patted his shoulder and shook his head. When Anastasia and company had entered, Garfield shifted his position, placing himself between Otto and them. To be precise, it was not due to Anastasia. Garfield, The presence of Julius, standing right beside Anastasia, was the reason. When he had appeared in the cabin, Otto's demeanor had shifted, and Garfield noticed it. Grateful for Garfield's thoughtfulness, Otto nodded. And then, standing beside Garfield, who was basically his younger brother at this point, Otto presented his right hand to Anastasia and company. Otto, as Garfield has said, my hand has already been treated. Anastasia, I see. That's good to hear. I was thinking 'bout having Julius healed if need be, but I guess I was being kinda nosy. Anastasia playfully stuck out her tongue while looking smug as she spoke, grating on Otto's nerves. If she thought they could not refuse her suggestion, she was unfortunately mistaken. While Otto and Garfield were absent from the Augria sand dunes, it was possible that the duo of Anastasia and Julius had deepened their friendship with Subaru, Emilia, and the others, but Otto, unlike them, I properly remember that you two are our enemies. Anastasia, You're really a good Otto Kuhn. Of course, I don't dislike Emilia-san and the others, but without that kinda response, I'd lose my competitive edge, too. Otto's gaze sharpened, to which Anastasia responded with a gentle smile. Although her expression and voice was soft, the light in her pale blue eyes was firm, and Otto too understood. Even though they had gone to the trouble of crossing the border into the Wallachian Empire, Anastasia clearly established camp delineations. That was precisely why they had boarded the dragon carriage in a position of such importance to the Kararagai city-states. In that regard, the problem was not Anastasia. Otto, Knight Julius, earlier, I made an excessive statement. Allow me to apologize for that. Otto, apologize, huh? After addressing the other party with a harsh voice, hearing Julius's reply caused a sigh to escape Otto's lips. The excessive statement seemed to be the comment that was expressed over the treatment of the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony from the earlier exchange. In the sense that he was voicing his opinion, Julius was merely exercising his right to do so. Those were supposed to be Julius's own words to the then agitated Otto. Otto, so, you say that you have reconsidered? That you are an outsider, after all? Julius, no, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony's authority. I am involved in the sense that I have been harmed by it. I also have a younger brother, whose existence I cannot recall. From that point of view too, I do not consider myself to be an outsider. Otto, in that case, in what way did you exceed yourself? Lowering his voice, Otto furrowed his brow as he listened. Despite having offered an apology, Julius stated that he had no intention of changing his opinion regarding the part that Otto was concerned about. It did not come to mind, however, another reason for Julius to apologize. To the puzzled Otto, Julius then said, sincere gratitude and even a certain kind of respect towards the other permeating his yellow eyes. Julius, Otto Donno, for taking away your role, I apologize. Otto, Julius, I could tell by your reaction. Had I not brought it up, you would have spoken the same yourself. Nevertheless, using the fact that I myself am a victim of gluttony as a pretext, I took away your role as a person partaken in the camp. Therefore, cutting his words off there, Julius bowed deeply. Then, with the crown of his light purple hair facing them, Julius, from the bottom of my heart, I apologize. I am truly sorry. Yes, when shown such a genuine display of apology, Otto bit hard on the inside of his cheek. Had his reaction been any slower, he would have almost bit his lip in front of the other party. Bowing his head, Julius could not see it, but Anastasia could. That absolutely had to be avoided. Anastasia, Julius really wanted to apologize for that, didn't he? So, I was thinking that if Otto Kuhn's hand hadn't healed yet, it'd be easier to start the conversation that way. Garfield, is that right? Well, sorry about that. Anastasia, that's fine. Even if without a cue, my knight is good at apologizing properly. Setting aside Otto and Julius, the two parties involved, exchanging such words were Anastasia and Garfield. Meanwhile, Julius kept his head bowed, and Otto belatedly realized that his response was being awaited. Otto needed to give a response, or this apology would not be complete. Otto, your head, raise it, please. Taking his time, Otto slowly addressed the other party. In response, Julius also began to slowly raise his lowered head. Seeing the knight in his wasso, with the scar under his left eye accentuating his dashing features, Otto sighed, and Otto, that your statement was not malicious, and that you were trying to cooperate with Natsuki-san, I do not doubt. But, you are our enemy. That remains the same. Julius, Otto Dono. Otto, I am not a knight, so we have no opportunity to cross swords. You are neither a merchant nor a civil official, so we have no opportunity to cross words. Nevertheless, though we are in a position to cross neither swords nor words, you are my enemy and I am yours. Tightly clenching his fist hard enough that it hurt, Otto declared to Julius. Taking Otto's words head-on, Julius's eyes widened. Be it astonishment or amazement, the fact that it was not the kind of surprise you would direct at someone you don't think of as an enemy protected Otto's pride. Otto, Anastasia Summer, I would like to say this beforehand. No matter what Natsuki-san's and Emilia Summer's opinions are, the reason for making use of the Sin Archbishop is in the Empire. If we are slandered because of the Sin Archbishop's existence, it is the Empire that should bear the blame. Anastasia, I have no objection to that either. Even if I did, I don't think I would take such a thing in my hands. 'Cause you know, that's how it is, right? Anastasia closed one eye at Otto, who turned in her direction and made a pertinent argument. As she stroked her white fox scarf, she turned her gaze in another direction, towards the cabin where Subaru and the others probably were. Anastasia, no matter what kind of plan it may be, as soon as a Sin Archbishop is allowed to be involved, people around us will be disgusted, regardless of how deep or shallow the relationship is. This isn't true just for the Empire, nor just Emilia's camp, it's true for us too. Otto, if you understand, then that is fine. Nodding to Anastasia's answer, Otto relaxed his shoulders slightly. If a Sin Archbishop was involved in a matter, it could not be received positively in any situation. That was the framework of this world and an unshakable truth. No matter what the victim Julius said, no matter how the kind-hearted Emilia showed the path to forgiveness, and no matter what the foolishly hopeful Subaru wanted, this remained true. For that reason, they must thrust at one another. Knives pointed at each other's necks, while mutually pressing their fatal wounds. Otto, sorry, there is something I need to do. Excuse me. After confirming their common understanding, Otto suddenly said so. Hearing that, Anastasia tilted her head with a, is that so? Beside her, Julius digested Otto's earlier declaration, his surprised expression tightened, but Otto could not bear to look at him for too long, so he quickly turned away. Garfield, bro. My amazing self too. Otto, Garfield. Garfield, huh? Otto, I'll be fine by myself. Swiftly, Otto attempted to leave the cabin. As Garfield tried to follow him, Otto blocked him with his hand, saying so in an easy-to-understand manner. It was not that he was okay alone, it was a plea that he wanted to be left alone. And then, the considerate younger brother obediently listened to him, nodded, and saw him off. Otto, Closing the quiet cabin door, Otto departed with long strides. He left Garfield in the same room as Anastasia and Julius. He was worried about what they would talk about, but he did not have the emotional leeway to support him. He did not run, but his mind was in such disarray that he wanted to run. Otto, my role, taken? Wanting to apologize, his head bowed. Julius's words echoed within Otto's head, causing him to clench his molars. To be able to apologize, Julius was indeed the knight of Anastasia, a sincere and earnest person. Such a pleasant thought did not at all come to his mind. He just felt very bitter about Julius's misunderstanding. Julius was making a big mistake. Had Julius not said anything, Otto would never have said something that would poke a hole in Subaru's impasse. It was true that, as Julius said, he would be lying if he said he did not have the same thoughts as him, but one could be assured that Otto would never say that, even in his death. It was not because he was deprived of his role that he was so furious. Otto was furious with Julius there because he said something he should not have said. No, he did not want him to say. Julius did not understand that. And yet, the one making that misunderstanding. Otto, indeed, those two are alike. At his core, this was proof that Julius was an idealist just like Subaru. He believed that human beings were fundamentally good. But that was not because he was carefree. It was not because he was ignorant of reality. Even knowing the reality, he was still able to boast like that. That was the same as Natureski Subaru and Emilia, their way of walking in the light. Otto, HK. Otto-kun, that's no good. Suddenly, Otto felt his arm being gripped, snapping him back to reality. Looking to see what had happened, he realized that he had unconsciously raised his arm, which was now being restrained by someone from behind. Most likely, in a surge of emotion, he had just been about to punch the wall. It was the very right hand which had just been healed by Garfield. Roswell, this is Garfield's healing magic, isn't it? It seems that it has just been healed, so it'd be awkward for you if you break it again right away. Otto, I acknowledge that I did something stupid, so would you let me go? He involuntarily muttered with a low voice, surprising himself a little. But, the other party, seemingly used to it, made no mention of it and released Otto's arm. Standing there was Roswell, who he never really wanted to run into. Although Otto never really wanted to encounter him, he now felt especially averse. Roswell, that expression suggests you don't even want to speak with me, doesn't it? Otto, if you can see that and still approach me, then you, Margrave, are truly relentless. Roswell, that's an uncharacteristically dull retort from you. Seems like you're taking it harder than I thought, Tilda. Otto, Naturally, Roswell had also been a part of the earlier discussion in the passenger cabin. He was well aware that Otto's heart was furious during that meeting, as well as that he held an unyielding stance on how to treat the Sin archbishops. Knowing this and still acting this way, it was clear as day that Roswell intended to provoke Otto. If that was not the case, then he was far too inept at interacting with others. Otto, I am sure you can tell, Margrave, but I don't have the patience for this right now. If you do not wish for your whole body to be munched on by the rats that I have purchased, I would advise against ruffling my feathers. Roswell, if I ever find myself being nibbled by rats, I'll know that you were behind it. That may have been useful to hear, but I'm genuinely concerned about you. Otto, about me? As Otto responded with skepticism, Roswell nodded. With that response, Otto understood that Roswell was pestering him from a different angle. That being done to him in a situation where he lacked patience made him truly feel nauseated, making it all the more abhorrent. Otto, Margrave, what are your thoughts? Roswell, me. I'm of course in the same boat as you, Otto-kun. I couldn't care less if the Empire is destroyed. Otto, Roswell, oh, perhaps I was mistaken. The Sin archbishops are nothing but poison incapable of doing any good. Instead of pondering on how to make use of them, it would be better if the empire just disappeared. Just as you suggested to Subaru-kun, it'd be fine if we just returned home bringing back only the members who he would feel guilty about abandoning. Roswell's attitude, shrugging as if to say it was a great idea, plainly displayed Otto's own views back at him, giving him an unpleasant mood. Shamelessly speaking in order to draw close to him, Roswell went out of his way to fire Otto's approach back at him, showing that the sheer nastiness of his character was reaching its peak. At the same time, even though Otto recognized the pragmatic side of his own suggestion, he was repelled by his own inclination to think of it as the best solution. Observing this self-loathing Otto, Roswell peered closely and remarked, "Roswell, I will tell you this much, I think you're doing more than enough, Otto-kun. Otto, it seems that without makeup, even your sharp tongue is dulled, Margrave. It almost sounds as if you are trying to close the distance with me." Roswell, I have no talent for getting close with people, so don't assume I am doing so. Either way, I believe you're doing more than enough. But, there's also the matter of no matter how much you struggle. Otto, no matter how much I struggle? Caught off guard by Roswell's choice of words, Otto's eyebrows twitched. As Otto repeated it, Roswell gave a deep nod. He rested a hand on the slender chin of his makeup-free face, and as he closed a single eye, leaving his blue eye open. Roswell, this recent incident serves as a perfect example. In most cases, things go according to how Subaru-kun and Emilia Summer desire them to. Everyone rallies around, organizing their efforts, arranging the path for their wishes to be met. Otto, what are you saying? Taken aback by Roswell's sudden assertion, Otto furrowed his brow. The idea that Subaru and Emilia's wishes always came true was incredibly absurd. If that were the case, Emilia would have been crowned king and taken on the name Natsuki Emilia long ago. The fact that this had not happened meant that it was not the case. Otto, are you mocking me? Or perhaps, are you ridiculing Natsuki-san and Emilia Summer? Roswell, neither. I merely pity you. Your family's contributions played a part in our journey from Lagunica to Wallachia. For that, I am grateful to you, and it is out of this gratitude that I offer this earnest advice. Otto, Roswell, becoming overly engrossed and finding yourself at odds with Subaru-kun and Emilia Summer is toxic for you. This toxin will erode you, and I fear that it may eventually kill you. After all, someone as capable as you is hard to come by. Gently, as he calmed the tone of his voice, Roswell spoke in a straightforward manner. At some point, he had dropped the clownish intonations in his speech, and he appealed to Otto Suin with sincerity in his heterochromatic eyes. At those words and attitude, Otto stayed silent for a while, and after a bit, he noticed it. The aim of the person named Roswell L. Mathers. Otto, Margrave, I have understood your words. Therefore, I shall not follow your advice. Roswell, Narrowing his eyes, Roswell let out a long sigh with a hint of concern. After that, to him as he tried to hear the truth for why his advice was rejected, Otto declared. Otto, I understand. I must be a hindrance for you. After all, I have not forgiven what you had orchestrated, Margrave, and I suspect that you are still plotting something. Roswell, oh? Otto, that was why you decided to approach me after seeing that I had a great deal of discontent built up. Perhaps you thought it a perfect chance to get rid of me under a plausible pretext, but that was a grave mistake. Indeed, Roswell's assessment was accurate. The earlier exchange had been, in the time since Otto had joined the Emilia camp, perhaps the moment he had felt the most anger. Before joining the camp, there had been an incident that had angered him to the point of punching Subaru, and this anger rivaled that. Otto, although, if you were thinking that I would just give up on everything because of that, you are gravely mistaken. Roswell, Otto-kun. Otto, first of all, what was all that nonsense just now? Whatever Natsuki-san and Emilia Summer wish for will come to pass? Please do not utter such absurdities. That is not true in the slightest, which is why I, Garfield, Beatrice-chan, Ram-san, Petra-chan, Frederica-chan, Patrash-chan, and everyone else have struggled so desperately to get to this point. Saying that he was extremely misguided, Otto was viscerally furious at Roswell. Roswell's earlier assertion was this: whatever Subaru and Emilia desired, the people around them would somehow make it happen, so it was not necessary for him to be overly concerned and wear himself out. That no matter how much he objected, his opinion would be suppressed, making his presence meaningless. However, Otto, such a thing, I could never. Roswell, Otto, Margrave, about what you said, I do not know to what extent you were indicating that everyone rallies around them. At the very least, supposing I were to side with all of Natsuki-san's opinions, affirming them all, and arranging the path such that everything would come to pass. I do not consider myself capable of doing such a thing. He was not like Beatrice or Garfield, who could lend their powerful abilities. Nor was he like Ram, Frederica, or Petra, who could provide their indispensable support. He did not have the power to grant all their wishes either, so what was the meaning of Otto being there? Otto, I cannot do that. I will not acknowledge that. I will not allow that. Whenever Natsuki-san and Emilia-sama desire something, the moment that I stop speaking out, will be when my very reason for being ceases. Roswell, Otto, unfortunately for you, Margrave, it will not be as you desire. While intensely staring at Roswell, Otto plainly declared so. It was probably the first time that Roswell had been so one-sidedly pressured in the span of a single breath. Of course, while it had never been expressed aloud, there had always been this kind of intense tension between Otto and Roswell. For that reason, when Roswell saw the opportunity, he approached Otto in an attempt to remove a hindrance, and attempt to set the board to his advantage. But Otto would not yield. At least, not because of today's ludicrous reasoning. Otto, I have decided where I stand. I cannot walk in the light, and that is fine. Roswell, Otto, that was a bad move, Margrave. It would have been better had you not approached me. Nevertheless, the outcome would have remained unchanged, or so he would have liked to say. However, if he had at least taken more time before reaching an outcome, it may have swayed. But Roswell's haste to get the result that he desired had led to the opposite, to an undesired result, and it was at the moment when Otto caught his breath in front of Roswell, who wore a pleasantly different sullen face. Otto-san. Found you. Upon being called by a high-pitched voice, accompanied by the patter of tiny footsteps, Otto turned around. Thereupon, his eyes met with Petra's, who was running towards him while waving her hand. Otto, Lady Petra. I mean, Petra-chan. Reflexively addressing her out of the habit that had formed when they were undercover, Otto placed a hand over his mouth and corrected himself. Petra, who had run up to Otto and was slightly out of breath, asked. Petra, Otto-san, is your hand okay? I heard you punched the wall with all your strength. Otto, everybody seems to be asking me that. Fortunately, Garfield healed it for me, so it is fine. Sorry for making you worry. Petra, no, not at all, as long as you are okay, then it's fine. What is the master doing? Giving a wry smile, Otto showed Petra his unharmed hand since she had been worried. Relieved, Petra immediately changed her expression and glared at Roswell. In response to that gaze, Roswell weakly shook his head and said, No. Roswell, I was just reflecting on my habitual behavior. Petra, the master is? Since you never reflect on anything, would it not taste like nothing? One Roswell, you were. Otto had also intended to put a lot of pressure on Roswell, but the impact of Petra's single comment was incomparable. In fact, Roswell's shoulders had drooped, but Petra, who had been watching Roswell intently, suddenly exclaimed as if she had just remembered something. Then, she turned towards Otto, the ribbon on her head swaying. Petra, speaking of which, I didn't just hear about your hand. A little while ago, you guys were talking about Louis-chan, so. Otto, Ah, yes, that is right. For that as well, sorry for making you. Petra, so I, in place of Otto-san, went ahead and hit Subaru. Otto, Thrusting out her small hand that was tightly clenched into a fist, Petra declared so, looking alternately at the outstretched fist and at Petra's enthusiastic face. Otto blinked his eyes in surprise. At Otto's reaction, Petra's breathing became a little rough, and Petra, Otto-san, I heard that you held back. Because Otto-san would have felt sorry for hitting the now small Subaru. So, I did it myself. Opening her closed fist, Petra showed off her palm. As she peeked at him from behind her palm, Otto stayed silent for a while. But he could not hold back. Otto, ha ha. When Julius had apologized to him, he had endured the discomfort. When Roswell had gone on the offensive, he had even endured the helplessness of being showered with blows. But now, when faced with Petra's words of good sentiment, he could not endure it. Laughter did not mean that everything was settled. With the issue still remaining, as always, Otto was opposed to Subaru's thoughts. Even so, while remaining opposed, since his reason for being was to keep saying that the point of compromise Subaru had found was unacceptable, he would continue to say it. He would never give in. Otto, Petra-chan. Petra, yes. Otto, thank you. Saying that, Otto placed his palm against the palm that the young girl had extended. A light clap resounded, and Petra laughed, saying, My pleasure. Arc 8, Chapter 25, The Wishes of Those Who Near Death. Head. At his words, Medium gave a clueless face, but Vincent made no comment of it. This conversation with the siblings constantly veered off course, and thus he would only interject when it did get off topic. Flop, Medium and I were orphans. We were raised in a shoddy institution. We got rescued from there, and were brought to Countess Drakroy's domain. That's where we met Borleroy, and became sworn siblings with him. Got everything so far? Vincent, continue. Flop, those really were some busy days. Both Medium and I were pretty ignorant about the outside world, so anything and everything we saw was fresh and new. Countess Drakroy was someone who had a very broad outlook on things, so she gave us, who had no place to go, an education. Vincent, considering all that, it has not produced any results for your sister. Medium, that's 'cause I preferred doing physical activities with Balabro and the others. Pouting her lips, Medium seemed to have regained at least a small amount of her good mood. Vincent had also heard of the circumstances in the Drakroy domain that Flop spoke of, and surprisingly, the administration of the territory was something that could be evaluated favorably as well. Known as the Scorching Lady, she was often evaluated as having a rough temperament, but the special quality of Serena Drakroy was the flexibility of her ideas, which were unbound by any preconceived notions. In most cases, the people of the Wallachian Empire did not have the vision to look at things from a long-term perspective. Since the majority of children did not show promise of serving effectively as manual labor or as military strength, many people were born, and among them, those who were blessed with ability and circumstance would survive, with very few attaining great success as strong individuals. Though it was a different case for the people of one's own family, this was a country where the endeavor to raise a broad range of capable people by cultivating them during their childhood was mostly considered to be an impracticable theory. Flop and Medium were two siblings who had been blessed with that rare opportunity. No, Borleroy, whose talent had been discovered, had also been one of those people. Flop, of course, it wasn't all just fun things, and Countess Drakroy couldn't always be kind to us. Back then, Countess Drakroy had just usurped the territory from her father by herself, so it was pretty busy for her. Medium, we also faced plenty of dangerous situations. Flop, like when those assassins attacked, aiming for Countess Drakroy's life. Those were tough times. While the two reminisced on their fond memories, Vincent searched for the main point of the matter. But then again, the main point had already been touched on near the start. Putting it this way, there were words he had grown accustomed to being told, and gazes that he had grown accustomed to being turned to him. The words and gazes of these two likely conformed to those. That was to say, Flop, we got through those days together, there was a strong bond between us siblings and Borleroy. It's precisely because of that relationship that I want to ask you this, Your Excellency the Emperor Kun. Vincent, Flop, our sworn brother, Borleroy to Meglif, as is widely known to everyone, he was a foolish traitor who couldn't see ahead, and lost his life after failing to achieve a desire beyond his station. But is that really true? Having asked that question, a stillness returned to Flop's expression once more. For himself and his sister, he was a sworn brother, but to the Empire, he was a traitor. Such was the position of Borleroy to Meglif, and of his death, Flop now inquired the truth from Vincent. As expected, these were words that had been said to Vincent plenty, and a gaze that had been turned to him many times. To die on the battlefield was the honor of a warrior, to refuse to yield even when pierced by swords was the way of the sword wolf. Even the Wallachian Empire, a place where such things were valued, was not entirely filled with those who would celebrate the deaths of those close to them. It was logical that human emotions would seek out the meaning and reason behind death. Henceforth, Flop and Medium asking him this here, was lamentation that he had grown accustomed to. Vincent, for what reason, do you doubt? Do you suspect that impurities have mixed into the rumors that have circulated through the streets, and feel you cannot place trust in them? Flop, nah, that's not it. It's just, I finally got my long-awaited chance to speak with someone involved. Then, it's not that strange to think that I want to hear a story that's much more trustworthy than the gossip, right? Vincent, though, this opportunity for dialogue was forcibly created by the two of you. When Flop tried to twist it into a matter of being an unlikely convenience, Vincent added that brief comment. And then, for a short while, he went into an unusual state of deep thought. The death of Borleroy to Meglif, as was spoken of on the streets. The descriptions of his death left in the history books would have been that he died violently in the failure of his attempted insurrection. What Flop and Medium heard, too, should have been nothing more, and nothing less than that. Thus, Vincent would not consider restoring Borleroy's honor past his death. The story was nothing more and nothing less than that, thus the world in which it was propagated was correct. Flop, I want you to answer, Your Excellency the Emperor Kun. Once I know that, I'll deliver the message to Vincent, I do not know what it is you desire, but the rumors you have heard are not mistaken, thus Vincent had tried to answer. However, Medium, able chin. Vincent's words were interrupted by a feeble, short call. Vincent, Standing before the cabin door, Medium was obstructing him from going outside. No, it seemed like she no longer had such intentions. Standing stock still, Medium's shoulders, of rather high stature for a woman, had been made smaller as she tightly hugged her own arms and looked at Vincent. In her blue eyes, tears had welled up. He had long become used to seeing people get teary-eyed while they made entreaties or pleaded for their life. Hence, that did not cause Vincent's heart to waver in the slightest. But, although his heart did not waver, it gave his presence of mind a short while longer to ponder. Flop and Medium, though he did not know what it was they desired. Indeed, Vincent had tried to give that answer. However, was that truly the case? What these two desired, he was sure to know. What these two desired was obvious, and Vincent had the answer. He had it, but even so, he did not speak. That was Vincent's way of doing things. But, that way of doing things, it could be crowned with the title of same as ever was. Vincent, The same as ever was method, was something that decided everything based on Vincent's own thoughts. But, with the same as ever was method, Vincent had the rug pulled out from under him by his loyal retainers. He had received a hard punch from a man with a naive mind, saying that the act of regarding conjecture as a certainty was off the mark. The same as ever was method, had its limits. What was required of Vincent, had to be the beyond whatever was method. Thus, in order to obtain that method. Vincent, the true circumstances behind the death of Bauleroy to Meglif, they differ from the rumors that have been disseminated throughout the streets. Indeed, Vincent had chosen to give an answer that differed to the same as ever was method. The moment they heard Vincent's answer, an alteration was yielded in the expressions of Flop and Medium. Flop's eyes slightly widened, and Medium's eyes blinked in amazement. Though astonishment could be seen in both, the nature of each varied. Seeing the difference between their reactions, Vincent understood. Vincent, Flop O'Connell, you already knew that reality was not in accordance with the rumors, did you not? Medium, Big bro? Flop, to say that I knew, would be a tad incorrect. The rumors just didn't sound much like Bauleroy at all, really, even Medium thought that much. Medium, why yeah. Invoking her attention, Medium nodded with a countenance of unfading perplexity. But, Flop, who prompted his sister to nod, had not denied Vincent's query. Receiving Vincent's gaze, Flop slightly tilted his head. Flop, don't tell me, did Your Excellency the Emperor Kun think that just because I'm close with Bauleroy, I would have already heard about it from him beforehand, and so I just tricked you into confirming the truth? Vincent, there is a possibility, but it is close to non-existent. The man I knew would not have raised the margin of error even slightly, and he would not have disclosed his actions to anybody until the very moment in which he carried them out. Flop, right. I think it's as you say, Your Excellency the Emperor Kun. I'm glad. It seems like with you, I can talk about the Bauleroy that I knew well. After all. Vincent, Flop, ever since that incident, whenever we heard Bauleroy's name somewhere in the Empire, Medium and I could only think of it as being someone we didn't know. Knitting his well-shaped eyebrows, a sense of loneliness wavered in Flop's blue eyes. That must have been true. Vincent was not surprised by that. In order for it to be so, Chaisha had tailored the rumors to become so, Bastet's had directed them like so, and it was Vincent who had given the orders for them to do so. Everything was in order to conceal the truth of the situation, to conceal the reason as to why Bauleroy to Meglif had become a rebel. That was Flop, that rebellion, it wasn't Bauleroy's true motive. Medium, big bro. At the words Flop had spun, Medium shrieked out loud. Her round eyes were wide open, and as she vigorously shook her head side to side. Medium, that's weird, you're talking crazy. Bauleroy was, because. Abel Chin. Say something. Tell Big Bro that he's being crazy. Vincent, if there is a need to correct him, I shall. If not, I shan't. That is all. Medium, you have no reason to say anything. At a complete loss for words, Medium's face looked as if it was saying she could not comprehend what was happening. Meanwhile, Flop took a long, deep breath, coming to grips with the fact that Vincent had not denied the misgivings he had voiced about the true circumstances behind Bauleroy's death. According to the rumors on the streets, Bauleroy to Meglif had been unsatisfied with his position of divine general, so he launched a rebellion aiming to reach a higher standing, and died a dog's death as a foolish failure. That had served the role of proving the sturdiness of Vincent Volekier's throne, and weakened the flames in the hearts of many who would have plotted treachery. Vincent, as irony would have it, now it is my own strategy that has supported the rebellion, causing those weakened flames to intensify once again. Flop, Yeah, it was only peaceful for a little while. But, that's probably just how the outcome got used, his original objective wouldn't have been that. Vincent, Flop, Bauleroy had a different goal. Your Excellency the Emperor Kun just made use of the outcome, but the prerequisite should have been something different. Your Excellency the Emperor Kun, do you know that objective? There had been plenty of time for him to think about it. That was likely the reason Flop could speak without hesitation. Upon Bauleroy's death, a rumor that differed from the truth had been circulated, and Flop always continued to think about just where the truth was. Ergo, he had not let this golden opportunity slip. The magical sharpshooter, Bauleroy to Meglif, his objective in taking part in that rebellion, that was Vincent, to exact revenge upon the killer of Private First Class Miles, who had lost his life on a special mission to the Kingdom of Lagunica, Flop, HK. Vincent, what is so surprising, Flop O'Connell? This ought to have been a fact of which you were aware. At every turn, you are attempting to test the Emperor. It is disrespectful. As Flop held his breath, Vincent spoke those words and snorted. Similar to how he had previously asked if the rumor about Borleroy was true or not, this had likely been another trap that Flop had set for Vincent. It was in order for Flop to ascertain if there was value in continuing this conversation. However, in response to Vincent's voice, Flop shook his head with a no. On his expression of surprise, as a second type of surprise emerged. Flop, I have no intention of making shameless excuses. I certainly have tried to test you. But Vincent, what is it? Flop, your answer, it surprised me that you said the name of Big Bro Miles. Vincent, .. As surprise flowed through Flop's voice, Vincent narrowed his eyes. Setting aside the first answer about testing Vincent, the second answer was of a matter not worthy of surprise. Vincent knew about Private First Class Miles, who had a close relationship with Borleroy. No, it was not just Miles. Vincent, it is natural that I grasp the positions, names, and appearances of those who serve me. Whose orders do these soldiers and generals believe they are receiving? To whom do they think they are devoting the entirety of their souls? If not for that, the position of Emperor would be tantamount to always having blades pointed at one's back. He was ordering them to put their lives on the line, so he ought to know about those people. They might come to try and take his life, so he ought to ensure that he knew their faces. And the names of those who had lost their lives while following his orders was something that he would never forget. Vincent, I am different to those of the kingdom. My heart shall not break for the death of each soldier and general. I merely ought to remember. Therefore, regarding both Private First Class Miles and Borleroy to Meglif, I shall. Medium, able chin, won't forget? Vincent, that is all, I shan't offer consolation. Vincent replied so to Medium's feeble, tottering words. On top of that, Vincent added one more comment to Flop and Medium. Vincent, supposing you two desire to restore Borleroy's honor, that is impossible. Medium, Why? Vincent, if it were to be known that the rumors differed from the truth, people would begin to sow distrust in every rumor. The rise of that would lead to needless cracks in the foundation of the empire. Such a thing would not have. Flop, Borleroy wouldn't have wanted it. Right? Flop confirmed that with Vincent, who wondered just how much Flop understood. Since it would be futile to keep it concealed, Vincent nodded. Then, an intense turmoil spread further and further across Medium's face. To that sister of his, Flop spoke gently, like a big brother, but also with a level of strictness. Flop, dear sister, you said it yourself, didn't you? That you'd help me out, no matter what I do. That's our family oath. I can also puff my chest out and say that. Medium, that's right. But, what do you mean? That's. Flop, if Borleroy had truly intended on starting a rebellion and killing His Excellency the Emperor Kun, he would have come to us and asked for help. Even if it would have only raised the chances by a small amount, if he was truly serious about it, that's what he would have done. Medium, At Flop's words, Medium's eyes opened wide. The family oath that had also been spoken of earlier, Vincent did not know how much of a binding force that was, but if it carried a meaning so strong that one would not refuse the invitation to rebel against the Emperor, Flop's theory would be valid. Flop, Borleroy had no real intention of succeeding in that rebellion. At the same time, he had the objective of wanting to get revenge for Big Bro Miles. The inconsistency there is that Borleroy wouldn't have thought that Big Bro Miles's killer was His Excellency the Emperor Kun. Vincent, Flop, finally, may I ask just one more thing? Though he should have already shamelessly spent all of his time, There were no words to describe Flop's courage as he still held up a single finger. Vincent responded with nothing, but as if Flop had taken that as the situation being in his favor. Flop, did Bauleroy fulfill his dearest wish? Did he get revenge for Big Bro Miles? Vincent, no. Flop, I see. With just that brief response, Vincent would not hand over any more information. Even if Flop requested such, he had no intention of handing it over. Even if Flop aspired to get revenge for the two siblings, for Bauleroy and Miles, it would be impossible for him to accomplish that. And above all else, that was because Vincent, Bauleroy to Meglif would not have desired it. Flop, sorry for taking so long, Your Excellency the Emperor Kun. His dialogue with Vincent concerning Bauleroy to Meglif having concluded, Flop bowed his head. His head had been bowed. In truth, the dialogue had taken a long time. Vincent, are you unable to imagine just how valuable my time is during this crisis? Flop, I have confidence in my appraisal of things. That's why I could tell that the message entrusted to me was of the highest value right now, and used it to get the answers that my sister and I wanted. Vincent, your disrespect knows no bounds. Additionally, do not speak falsehoods to me. Flop, Vincent, those were not the answers that you and Medium had wanted, those were the answers that you had wanted. This was nothing more than her simply going along with your request. That was the family oath you spoke of, was it not? Jerking his chin, Vincent corrected the mistake in Flop's speech. Hearing that, Medium widened her eyes, and after a moment of surprise, Flop nodded with a right. Flop, I was the one who wanted to know the answer. If you're planning on an execution, my head is the only one I want you to lop off. Vincent, fool. You think I will engage with your careless remarks any longer? Medium, do not look at me with those eyes. Conveying that he did not have the time to go along with frivolous chatter, Vincent snorted at the gaze of Medium, which was seeming to plead for her brother's life, and then, Vincent, so, have you been satisfied? Flop, yeah, that's right. I fully understand that amidst Your Excellency the Emperor Kun's precious time, you've earnestly engaged with me. And you did so without even getting caught in my repeated tricks. Vincent was silent as Flop unashamedly declared that he had tested the Emperor. Supposing Vincent's answers had not fulfilled Flop's desires, what would he have done? Inferring that question from the silence, Flop smiled. Flop, if that happened, I would have brought the message to Husband Kun instead of Your Excellency the Emperor Kun, saved the Empire, and then have him become Emperor. Vincent, you. Flop, nah, it's really good that we settled things without that happening. You weren't one of the makers of the world that I must get revenge on. Vincent, revenge, on the world? At the words mixed into Flop's sigh of relief, Vincent raised an eyebrow. Then, beside the conversation between her brother and the Emperor, Medium sniffled as she responded well. Medium, Big Bro is always saying it. The reason that something unpleasant happens isn't because of a single bad person, but because of the world that made that person bad. Flop, that's quite a loose paraphrasing, but yes, exactly. Well, since this is an unpleasant world where those kinds of unpleasant things happen unreasonably, I'm striving to steadily improve it, even if through small things. That's my revenge against the world. Vincent, what nonsense. The world on which revenge must be taken, and the makers of that world. While thinking that the way it had been put was similar to Cecily's segment, Vincent muttered. Hearing that mutter, Flop gave a wry smile, and Medium got angry with flaming eyes, saying what's with you Tilda? At the reactions of the siblings, Vincent thought of it as increasingly foolish. There was no doubt that Vincent was one of the people who had shaped the world which Flop felt to be absurd. Even if someone thought about making change for certain reasons, as long as they did not enact it, they would remain as a target of that revenge. So, why had Vincent been excluded from that? He could not understand. Considering that the origin had been him abandoning the same as ever was method, and then using somebody else's thinking as a reference while aiming for the beyond whatever was method. It was something that he did not even want to think about. More importantly, Vincent, you had said earlier, if I did not meet your expectations, you would deliver the contents of the message to another person, and thereby eliminate the peril to the Empire. Flop, yeah? That's right. I had intended to entrust it to husband Kun. Vincent, it matters not who you were to entrust it with, rather, if entrusting it implies that the great disaster will thus be eliminated, it must be a very important measure. A measure left behind by Chaisha, who deceived Vincent, and had schemed all sorts of things. Just what sort of thing was it? Vincent, every single word and phrase, deliver it without leaving out anything. Assume that even a single omitted phrase can alter the future of the Empire. Flop, that was my intention from the start, but man, that's really scary. In total, I've been put in charge of 3 messages. Ahem ahem. Cheer me on so I can do it well, dear sister. Medium, yep. Leave it to me, big bro. Do your best, Tilda. Receiving Vincent's threat, Flop hyped himself up as Medium raised her voice. As Vincent watched their charade, Flop cleared his throat a little once more. Flop, first is number 1. About Cecila's segment, I had replicated a technique of Olbart Dunkelken's to shrink him, then he was sent to the Gladiator Island. Likely, he has already crawled out using his own strength, but supposing he is late in his escape, assume that he is there. Vincent, Flop, well, because when he was talking to me, he looked just like you, Your Excellency the Emperor Kun. His tone and manner of speech were like yours as well. But, that was exactly how he put it. As Vincent narrowed his sable eyes, Flop added that on in a panic. But, there was no need for him to explain. In reality, ever since Chaisha had ousted Vincent from the throne, it was an undeniable truth that he had begun playing the role of emperor. Since Chaisha had been cautious, he probably would have never returned to his original form, and there was no doubt that he approached his final moments while imitating even Vincent's tone of voice. When he had witnessed the shrunken Cecilus in the imperial capital, he had roughly fathomed a guess that it was something done by Chaisha. The objective of that was also clear, since with Vincent ousted from the throne, Cecilus's presence would still be an impediment. Vincent, even Chaisha could have never deceived him. If Cecilus had been living his days normally in the imperial capital, it would have been impossible for me to have been removed from the throne, no matter what Chaisha had prepared. To put it plainly, it was the right decision to shrink and banish a hindrance to his plan. If it was Chaisha, Cecilus would have had enough negligence to get shrunk. Vincent, no objections. Continue. Flop, then, number 2. The sanctum has been detained in the fortified city. Depending on its presence, you may discover the way of being of the great disaster, which invites ruin to the Empire. Vincent, Flop, to be honest, this seems quite important, but I don't really get what it means. But it doesn't seem like you need me to repeat it, so. Then, Flop let out his words with an attitude that lacked confidence, and held his breath. The reason for that was because, upon hearing that message, a change was yielded on Vincent's expression. Vincent tightly clenched down on his teeth, then placed his hand to his mouth and kept silent. He would not close both eyes at the same time. Thus, he forcefully shut only his right eye. The reason he had aimed for the fortified city of Garkla was because he had thought that if it were Chaisha, he would have left some sort of countermeasure there. But, that was incorrect. What Chaisha Gold had left behind in the fortified city was not a countermeasure. It was an answer. Vincent, we need to enter the fortified city as soon as possible. Medium, wait, able chin. There were 3 messages, right? There's still one left. Vincent headed for the door, as his time was too valuable to remain at a standstill, but Medium stopped him. Halting his step at her words, Vincent took a deep breath. The first was concerning Cecilus, the second was an answer, so then what had been left as the third? Vincent, let me hear it. If there is a card that still remains unturned. He would make full use of it, and protect the Wallachian Empire from the great disaster. As Vincent requested that, Flop looked back into his sable eyes, and, clearing his throat again to try and deliver the message exactly as it had been entrusted to him. Flop, Your Excellency. Vincent, Flop, my assistance in getting the wheel out of the ditch, concludes here. Vincent, what an enormous fool. Declaring that and nothing more, Vincent headed for the door of the cabin. Flop, having ceased his imitation, raised his own voice in a please wait. Towards Vincent's back. Flop, even if you hurry and rush out of the cabin, the speed at which we reach Garkla won't change. It would only be different if Your Excellency the Emperor Kun could run faster than an earth dragon. Vincent, I have no choice but to make haste for the fortified city. If necessary, I shall fly there using the dragon ship or by other means. Flop, the sky isn't safe either. There might be dead flying dragons soaring around. Besides, there's still one part of this conversation remaining. Medium, why yeah. Got it, big bro. He felt impatient to head to the fortified city. Flop had pointed out the danger of the dragon ship from a reasonable angle, and as he ordered medium, his younger sister once again blocked Vincent's path. Vincent, even if it is to hasten the dragon carriage, or to share the information with Bastet's and the rest, there is no better option than for me to hurry. Get in the way, and you shall be executed. Medium, big bro, Abel's eyes are serious. Flop, but, if it's about the degree to which we seriously live our lives, then there's no way we'd lose. Your Excellency the Emperor Kun. I said this at the start. After you hear the message, I'd like to ask a favor. Vincent, While harboring impatient emotions, Vincent turned around to face Flop, who was pincering him together with medium. If he recalled correctly, Flop had impudently thrust the two conditions of the old story and a favor before him. He had no memory of accepting, but in order to hear the message, he had not outright rejected them either. Vincent, say it. He had already informed him that restoring Borleroy's honor was an impossible goal. Something that Flop and medium would have desired beyond that. Vincent could not think of a single candidate that would be impossible to achieve. If it was too far-fetched and unacceptable, then he would not be able to do anything, but Flop, Your Excellency the Emperor Kun, after the current crisis passes, you'll return to the seat of Wallachian Emperor, and the Empire will go back to normal. No, you'll do your best to make it even better, right? Vincent, I have reservations about the way you phrased it, but generally that is so. Vincent once had a plan of his own, but now that it has lost its footing due to Chaisha's scheming, he felt that he needed to discuss whether it was feasible. For that reason, Vincent nodded, as there was no room for denial. Flop gave an hum to his response, and smiling as if to say that it had benefited his intentions, he nodded. Flop, then, I wonder, after everything is over, I think Your Excellency the Emperor Kun is going to welcome many wives. But, would you let medium be one of them? Medium, eh? Vincent, what, so it was something like that? I do not mind. Medium, eh? Originally, the reason why Vincent had not welcomed any wives until now was in order to reduce the annoyances that would serve no purpose to his aforementioned plan. Now that his plan had broken down, he had no reason to overly adhere to it. Regarding the imperial selection ceremony, too, he felt the need to get his hands in the game. Henceforth, Vincent was merely facing the obligation he had to fulfill as a Wallachian emperor. As Vincent gave that response, Flop patted his chest in relief. And then, medium, eh? With that, only the person who was placed as the subject, medium, continued to tilt her head in confusion. Arc 8, Chapter 26, The Poison Princess. At the same time as when the open palm of Petra latte caused Natsuki Subaru's cheek to swell, and when Flop O'Connell's bombshell statement caused Medium O'Connell to be confused. As expected, seems like Yul couldn't wait for us to arrive. Gazing up as he gnawed on his kiseru, the strongest shinobi of the city-states, languidly muttered. Slouching his already sloped shoulders, having sat down cross-legged, the wolfman, Halibel, amidst the flowing nightscape, maintained vigilance of the quiet evening hours on the roof of the dragon carriage. Just before, the coupled dragon carriages had been targeted. Thanks to the children who had noticed the surprise attack before Halibel, they had been able to avoid that danger, but accidents like those did not happen very often. To ensure that they did not happen, was Halibel's duty. Halibel, after that, Lil Anna's gaze was real darn unsparing. I have to make up for it. The young girl who he had known since long ago due to ties with his kin, had paid an extraordinary price in order to go to the Empire on this occasion. Accompanied by Halibel, she had taken on the role of an envoy for the city-states, contrary to the expectation that this was an untapped business opportunity that ignited her merchant soul. Her objective was actually to search for a friend who had disappeared. She was a girl who did not want to show weakness. Of course, that was not something she would ever admit. Halibel, 'cause of that, she told the middle-aged geezer who she knew from long ago to not lend her a hand. As he said that, Halibel slowly stood up. Consisting of multiple dragon carriages coupled together, the coupled dragon carriages were being pulled without rest by a great number of ground dragons, an outstanding piece of engineering truly characteristic of the greedy empire, fully displaying the haphazardness of the divine protection of wind evasion. Even so, Halibel could not get used to that unnatural sensation. Even though the wheels were stumbling along an uneven path as the scenery flowed, neither wind nor shaking could be felt. Kuraragai had a low overall number of ground dragons, and beast carriages were commonly used, so he was well acquainted with shaking and sluggishness, and, speaking of unnatural sensations that he was not used to. Halibel, dang, even though the move-in corpses were already quite considerable. Seems like flying dragons are also becoming zombies. Reaching his finger into a gap in his Japanese-style clothing, Halibel sloppily scratched his belly as he grumbled. Reflected in his slit eyes as he gazed into the night sky, with cracks throughout their grand large bodies and spread wings, were flying dragons that had been reduced to corpses, a flock of undead flying dragons. A dense flock that concealed the stars like dark clouds, was slowly approaching the coupled dragon carriages. Halibel, there's a troublesome one in there. As Halibel gave such an evaluation to a presence mixed in among the flock of undead flying dragons. As if noticing the presence of that repulsive enemy, unrest began to sprout among the ground dragons pulling the dragon carriages. Even though the ground dragons were known as loyal friends of people, it was not as if they had lost their wildness upon being domesticated. Feeling a sense of danger at the looming threat, even they would have a frightened heart. The coupled dragon carriages were a big deal as an invention, but such danger was always present. Ground dragons were already highly empathetic creatures. If one of them got frightened, that fear would spread like a chain reaction. Dodo Juan. Right after Halibel had worried about that, a neigh that seemingly tore through the dusk reverberated. A lethal cry of the approaching threat, that paralyzed the ground dragons with fear, was not what it was. The neigh had originated from near the foremost wagon, where several dozens of ground dragons were lined up to pull the coupled dragon carriages. The thing that had played the most important role was the loud cry of a single jet-black ground dragon. Halibel, hair, seems like there's a young'un who's got a considerably manly spirit. With the quick-wittedness of the black ground dragon's neigh, the contagion of fear was intercepted from spreading throughout the ground dragons. Thanks to that, they had avoided the worst possible situation of the fearful ground dragons abandoning their duty, which would have caused the midair breakage of the coupled dragon carriages. And, just when Halibel was impressed, he had suddenly realized. Halibel, golly, the black ground dragon young'un was actually a female. Rather than manly, guess she's got a maidenly spirit. Unusually widening his narrowed slit eyes as he muttered, Halibel laughed a small caca. Smiling, the shinobi wolfman walked light-heartedly outside the dragon carriages that continued to run. Stepping forth into empty space, he leapt into the sky. He would engage the formidable enemy that even the admirer deemed to be troublesome, in order to prevent it from drawing any closer. That formidable enemy was Subaru. Whoa whoa whoa, what the heck is that? Clinging to the window frame of the corridor, Subaru's voice croaked as he gazed at the scene outside. Having finished his discussion with Rem and with Spica, in the passenger cabin, he had joined Emilia and the others who had been worriedly waiting for him. In the midst of giving them a report, he had been slapped by Petra. "Petra, this is for me, and a little bit for Otto-san too." Then, after receiving that physical reprimand, he grappled with the concern he had caused the girls and the worry he would continue to burden them with in the future, and that was the moment he braced himself. A sudden roar, as if to shatter the night sky itself, was heard, prompting Subaru and the others to rush to the window. "Subaru, that thing's a black flying dragon." "No, it's way too massive to even be compared to a flying dragon." "Beatrice, that size, it's not a flying dragon, in fact. Unmistakable, it's dragon class, I suppose. And furthermore." "Emilia, that dragon, it has 3 heads." Above Subaru and Beatrice, who were clung to the window side by side, Emilia also pressed herself against the window and exclaimed just that. Not only Subaru, but also the people of this other world, had recognized it as an atypical being of imposing appearance. Amidst the nightscape, soaring through the sky as if to race alongside the coupled dragon carriages, a fearsome colossal black dragon swung its massive body and 3 heads around, cracks running through its majestic figure and expansive wings. The 3 pairs of golden eyes asserted its presence even in the night sky, vividly revealing its true nature. Subaru, dragon zombie. Ram, a black dragon with 3 heads. No way, the 3-headed Velgrain? Subaru, do you know it, Naysummer? With their cheeks still pressed against the window glass, the trio of Subaru, Beatrice, and Emilia turned their gazes to Ram behind them. Ram, cradling her own elbow, and as she stared out at the dragon with her light crimson eyes. Ram, it's the infamous blight dragon that once wreaked havoc in a city by the border between the Empire and the Kingdom. Subaru, I thought as much. It's a given that a unique monster with such a nickname would be formidable. Ram, a few years after the demi-human war, that dragon almost scorched the commercial city to the ground. Furthermore. Subaru, furthermore, what? Is there something else? Ram, It was that battle in which the head of the family from 2 generations prior, Roswell Summers' grandmother, lost her life. After a moment's hesitation, the words Ram delivered made Subaru and the others catch their breaths. The threat of an enemy became far more visceral when one learned that a relative of somebody close to them had been a victim. All the more when it was Roswell's grandmother. There was no way she could have been weak. That stupendous blight dragon had been forestalled and was presently being held at bay by Halibel, but Tanza, who exactly are those wolf people over there? Pulling closer, with Subaru in the middle, Tanza peered out of the same window, unable to hide her astonishment at the confrontation unfolding outside. Surprised as she was, her phrasing was not incorrect, no matter how much it may have seemed so. Regarding the appearance of the fighting Halibel, her phrasing of those wolf people was indeed accurate. The reason was Subaru, Halibel-san, it looks like there's about 3 of him. Emilia, no, there are 4 of him, Subaru. It seems one has been on the dragon's back the whole time, trying to whittle down its wings. Beatrice, in this case, Betty doesn't think the exact number is the issue, in fact. Touted as the strongest shinobi of the city-states, Halibel had erased Sphinx's deadly attack in an instant. Those actions alone already lived up to his reputation, but the battle now within the view of Subaru and company was equally, if not more, befitting of that reputation. It was no big deal for him. Halibel, like a ninja, had split himself into clones and was engaged in aerial combat with the Blight Dragon. Given this high-speed combat, it was understandable that Tanza, unacquainted with Halibel, might have been fooled by the illusion into thinking that the true form of the strongest entity of the city-states was actually a shinobi group composed of multiple people, called the Admirers. In any case. Spica, wow. Rem, I believe the Blight Dragon isn't our only enemy. Wouldn't it be best for us to regroup with everyone else? Spica raised her voice in alarm, while Rem, who held her hand, suggested regrouping. Ideally, Subaru would have wanted to share the details regarding the handling of Spica with everyone in a more calm situation. However, given how the situation was moving, they did not have that luxury. Subaru, yeah, you're right. We should head to where everyone is. Abel and the others should also be on the move. Right now Emilia, Subaru. Following the proposal of Rem and Spica, Subaru was just about to suggest moving to another location. Midway through, suddenly, a burning pain on Subaru's chest interrupted his words, and Emilia supported his body as he tried to crouch down. But it was not just Subaru who had experienced this strange phenomenon. Tanza, are you all right? Beatrice, to be supported by you is humiliating, I suppose, dear girl. Ram, even Beatrice Summer. Barusu, what happened? Just like Subaru, the sudden pain had staggered Beatrice, and she expressed her displeasure as Tanza promptly supported her. Ram asked a question upon witnessing that exchange, to which Subaru replied, I don't know, Subaru, I just felt pain on my chest all of a sudden, huh? As he spoke, Subaru pulled down the neckline of his clothes, widening his eyes in shock. Seeing the same thing Subaru had, both Emilia and Ram furrowed their brows in confusion. Present there was a scar that seemed like a swollen red welt, and it was not just an ordinary scar. Beatrice, what is this? It's shaped like somebody's eye? Subaru, so you see it too? It's a mark shaped like an eyeball. Wait, don't tell me, Biko. Do you? Beatrice, Betty has the same mark on her soft skin, in fact. What had appeared on Subaru's chest was a mark roughly the size of a child's palm, a deformed design that appeared to depict an eye. It seemed like the same emblem had been carved into Beatrice, and Tanza confirmed by nodding deeply as she peered into the neckline of Beatrice's dress. Subaru, but it's just me and Biko? Why is everyone else unaffected? Ram, disgusting. Subaru, I'm genuinely worried. Do you really think I'd say something obscene given the situation and my current size? Ascertaining that the others did not have that same mark, which was still pulsating with pain, Subaru rubbed the mark on his chest and scowled. This was an abnormal sign that had emerged in this situation. Of course, it was clear that this was an action taken by someone opposing Subaru and company, but the intentions behind the targets were unclear. Perhaps, due to the contract binding Subaru and Beatrice, something cast upon one of their bodies could possibly manifest on the other as well. Subaru, no good, the limits are unclear no matter how much I think about it. The best thing would be to talk to someone knowledgeable about this. For now, we need to get out of here. Spica, AAU. Rem, HK. You can't. Once more, just as he tried to suggest they leave, he was interrupted yet again. In a flurried state, Spica and Rem forcefully pushed Subaru and the rest aside from where they were lined up. It was a sudden move, however it turned out to be the right one. Because from directly above them, the roof was penetrated, and the silhouette of an enemy wielding great shears dove in, violently tearing through the spot where Subaru and company had stood just moments before. Otto, Margrave. Petra, Master. In unison, two voices called out to him in concern, eliciting a wry smile from Roswell. These two might not have easily heeded his advice, and they certainly had not given their trust to Roswell, but their genuine worry was evident. Their inherent kindness not only spoke for itself but also served as a testament that they, too, were part of Emilia's faction. This was a distinction that set them apart from Roswell, who could never truly connect with them at the core. Roswell, HK, they've marked me. Swallowing his fleeting smile, Roswell pulled open his shirt to reveal his chest. There, a red swollen mark stood out, depicting the pattern of an eye. Petra, her face covered, had her eyes widened in shock upon seeing it. Otto's expression clouded over upon seeing the mark, murmuring, "That is." Otto, Margrave, did you say Mark? I hope it is not what I'm thinking. Roswell, it's exactly what you're thinking, Tilda. This is most likely a sign that we've been recognized as enemies, or perhaps designated as targets. Either way, it's not a welcome sign. Petra, enemies, or targets? Otto's glance fleetingly shifted to Petra beside him. She quickly grasped the implication behind his look, fervently shaking her head in response. From their reactions, neither Otto nor Petra had this emblem manifesting on them. While that in itself was a relief. Petra, what kind of effect does this emblem have? Otto, effects that I can think of could be a slow sapping of one's life, the ability to read the target's thoughts, or simply a means to continuously locate the marked individual. Petra, you deliberately listed the worst effects first, didn't you? So, the most likely possibility is that this mark serves to pinpoint our location? Roswell, indeed, both of you are truly astute. Roswell closed his eyes, seeing Otto and Petra's broad, calm judgment on the range of possibilities. The most dangerous kind of curse, one that drained life, was not something that could be remotely inscribed and probably did not need to be considered. However, being constantly located due to the mark would be problematic in itself. Roswell, we might need to consider splitting up to ensure our movements aren't entirely transparent. With the assistance of Halibel Dono outside, you two should distance yourselves from me. Otto, no, it seems it is already too late. Right after responding in a low voice, Otto pulled Petra's shoulder beside him. Petra, her eyes widening in shock, watched as an immense figure suddenly crashed through the window right beside her, entering the corridor of the coupled dragon carriages. The intruder, covered head to toe in black armor and wielding great shears, emanated a malevolent aura. It was an undead. Petra, HK. Suppressing a scream, Petra pointed at the enemy from within Otto's arms. While praising the bravery of the girl who had tried to take the initiative in the sudden situation, Roswell stepped forward and thrusted his palm forward before the enemy could swing the great shears upward. He swiftly drove his hand into the gap between the helmet that covered the face as if it was a sword, inserting his fingers into the opponent's eye sockets as he chanted. Roswell, Goa. In an instant, flames engulfed and exploded from the creature's head, causing the armor to rupture from within. Despite their flashy entrance, the intruder had not landed a single blow. Believing he had chosen the best course of action, Roswell turned around, only to realize he had been overly optimistic. One by one, soldiers in similar gear began pouring into the carriage from the roof and corridor. In no time, the entire coupled dragon carriage had transformed into a mobile battlefield. Medium, Abel Chin, over here. Hurry. Big bro, you run too. Flop, to tell you the truth, this is me running with my full strength, dear sister. Raising her voice with all her might, Medium protected the rear by repelling the enemy's attacks with her twin swords. The barbarian swords and the great shears clashed violently, and as they slipped through the openings she created, the two men she was protecting, Vincent and Flop, kept away from the enemy's onslaught. At first glance, that was a pitiful aspect, but there were reasons other than the fact that these two were respectively an injured man and a non-combatant. Flop, Your Excellency the Emperor Kun. Are you all right? Please don't tell me you've been poisoned. I'd be troubled if you were unable to keep your promise. Vincent, Humph. If you are worried, then hide your ambition a little. It is disrespectful. Flop, it may come as a surprise to you since you surround yourself with ambitious people, but there are people in the world who approach you for reasons other than ambition, Your Excellency the Emperor Kun. Vincent snorted at Flop, who spouted such a thoughtless remark while supporting his shoulder. Vincent's expression stiffened as he experienced a faint pain akin to his chest being pierced. It seemed as if the sudden pain along with the red scar was a thorn that ate into Vincent's flesh. Directly after that came the invasion of enemies which Medium was now keeping in check. Vincent was convinced that he was being assailed by the same thing that had once attacked him in the past, and in a way that was more troublesome than that time. That was Flop, that painful chest wound is. Vincent, though it is an annoyance, it is likely the evil eye of one of my siblings, Palladio Monesque. During the imperial selection ceremony, that man died in defeat. It seems he was unable to rest in peace. Flop, evil eye. So that effect is? Vincent, back then, it was something that allowed him to transmit his voice to somebody whose location he knew, but its precision seems to have improved after his death. While answering Flop's question, Vincent recalled a sibling who he had once allowed to die. Among his siblings competing for the imperial throne, Palladio had been in a particularly formidable class, but his cause of defeat ended up being that he had grown complacent about the power of his evil eye, and had been unable to make full use of that ability. It had never occurred to him that Palladio would rectify that after his death, but Vincent, no, even if he died, his way of being was not something that could be so easily changed. There is someone who has ordered Palladio to do this to me. Flop, but, if he was your sibling, that Palladio person must also be a member of the imperial family, right? No matter how undead he's become, for such a person to just do what he is told. Vincent, you have generally guessed it. If Palladio were to obey, it would only be to either the former emperor, Wallachia, or someone to whom he had yielded to as being above himself. One person who fit that criteria was Vincent himself, but considering that Palladio was on the side of the undead, he was excluded from the candidates from the start. As a definite undead, Drizzt, the former emperor and his biological father, emerged as a candidate, and as an important matter worthy of no consideration, the face of his missing younger sister also came up. But, taking the equipment of the enemy medium was facing into account, there was only one possible option for the real enemy. Vincent, Lamia, a being who satisfied the conditions for Palladio to obey, and was accompanied by brutal soldiers who carried great shears, the pruning core. There was nobody else but Lamia Godwin. Vincent presumed that the enemy was one of the three siblings whom he had evaluated highly while competing for the imperial throne in the imperial selection ceremony, and he forcefully clutched his aching chest. And, there. ? You're fucking annoying, damn dead people. A rough, bellowing voice could be heard, and a drawn blade rampaged ahead of the path of Vincent and the two siblings. At a glance, coming from the opposite direction of Vincent and company, the soldier, a man with unruly hair and an eye patch, was mincing up the undead that had broken through the window and entered the carriage, and was reducing them to dust. Then, breathing heavily, the soldier noticed Vincent and company, and Oi. You lot, gimme a hand. My sister's exhausted inside of there. Vincent, nay, it is you who ought to lend a hand. Huh? The hell are you saying? Why you your excellency the emperor? The man who had approached them with such a rough manner of speech, shouted upon realizing Vincent's identity. Thinking that was the natural response, Vincent found satisfaction in the reactions of those who were insolent and disrespectful, and, as he gestured to behind himself with his chin. Vincent, cooperate with the ones behind me and stop the enemy forces. With this, your sister shall be brought out. Why yes sir. Private First Class Jamal or Ali reporting, yes sir. Vincent, exert your utmost efforts, Jamal or Ali. The survival of the Empire hinges upon your performance. Jamal, HK. At Vincent's words, the one-eyed Jamal trembled all over. Immediately after, he let out a fierce, beast-like roar and ferociously leapt over Vincent and Flop's heads, rushing to aid Medium, who was fighting strenuously behind them, and he began to hold back the undead. Flop, you with the eye patch. The one fighting alongside you, Medium, is a candidate for the most honorable Empress Consort, so please treat her courteously. Medium, I still haven't said yes to that Tilda. In response to Flop's voice, Medium's reply lacked tension. Behind her, Flop burst into the room where Jamal's sister was, and he brought out a woman in a wheelchair, whose eyes were darting about. The woman clung to the wheelchair, and as her eyes pitifully brimmed with tears. Katya, what? What is it? Why, Why can't you just leave me alone? Vincent, That is likely something that everyone in the Empire is currently thinking. While he sincerely agreed with the voice of the woman who lamented the situation, Vincent shook his head. No matter how dear the situation became, they could not afford for the wheels of the coupled dragon carriages to come to a halt right here and now. If it were to stop, how much time would it take for the dragon carriage to start moving again? If that were to happen. Vincent, there is not a moment to waste. We must arrive at the fortified city. Serena, if you stop the dragon carriage right now, we'll be surrounded by even more enemy forces. The mechanism behind the coupled dragon carriages rely on the divine protection of wind evasion, so if we start going without the divine protection, we'll probably roll over. Anastasia, I knew that'd be too convenient, but that's a pretty big drawback, ain't it? Serena exposed the shortcomings of coupled dragon carriages when it was suggested that the dragon carriages be stopped, given the situation of the coupled dragon carriages being attacked and the enemies and allies being mixed up in the moving carriages. Once Anastasia was told this, it was clear that it would be impractical for them to stop. Anastasia, even if that ain't the case, the ground dragons have been running for almost half a day. And once they stop, they won't be able to start running again tonight. Serena, there's also a difference in manpower between us and our opponents. This is undoubtedly made up for by the mobility of the dragon carriages. If that gap were to disappear, our fate would be the same as that of the aging Prime Minister, Bastetts. Garfield, this ain't the time to be talking like that. Gramps, quit letting everyone tell you what to do. Bastetts, this is the nature of High Countess Drakroy's character, not to mention the fact that it is only natural that I will be executed after the great disaster has been resolved. Garfield, don't be so fucking determined to just give up. Serena made a light remark that was hard to judge as such, and Bastetts responded with words that had no air of frivolity, to which Garfield raised his voice. This new attack occurred at a point in time where Anastasia and Garfield were in the same room. Normally Garfield would have wanted to join up with Emilia and the others, but... Anastasia, I'm sorry that you were forced to be with us, Garf-kun, but thanks to you, both me and Serena-san and the others were saved, right? Garfield, tisk. I ain't worried about the captain, as long as Ram and Emilia Summer are with him. What? I'm worried about Otto bro. Anastasia, reason doesn't disappear when we get emotional. Otto-kun's a merchant, so don't worry, he can take care of himself. Whoops. Garfield, his arms not looking particularly strong, snarled in frustration as he intercepted the great-sheared Jaeger, who was boarding the carriage. With a blistering onslaught of punches, blows, and crushing strikes, he quickly hunted down the Jaeger in the blink of an eye. Then, Bastetts, who was grouped on the same side as Anastasia as a non-combatant, narrowed his eyes even more at the sight of the undead, beaten and crushed to dust. Bastetts, the pruning core. It seems that Her Excellency Lamia is here, after all. Serena, Her Excellency Lamia Godwin? That's someone I would have liked to have met once. Anastasia, really? What kind of person are they? Serena, the Prime Minister knows more about her than I do. After all, it was the Prime Minister who wanted her to become Emperor. Serena shrugged as she held up her own sword, the blade of which waved through the air, and Anastasia turned her gaze to Bastetts. The old man, who did not deny Serena's story, nodded, his eyes so narrowed, to the point of being like threads, that one could not readily see as to where he was looking. Bastetts, she was a woman worthy of being the Emperor of the Wallachian Empire. If not for Vincent Abelix and Prisca Benedict being in the same generation, she would have been Emperor. Serena, could it be that she has risen as an undead to come and fulfill that ambition? Perhaps, Prime Minister, you might be forgiven if you were to pledge your allegiance once again? Bastetts, Unfortunately, Her Excellency Lamia and I are losers, it is not in keeping with the imperial way. Serena closed one eye and sighed as Bastetts slowly shook his head. It seems Bastetts's serious answer was not to Serena's liking. Anastasia, too, could detect the mixed feelings between the former master and servant, but not much more. Anna. Suddenly, as she was contemplating, Anastasia heard a call in her ear, and raised her head. The call came from around Anastasia's neck, from Echidna, disguised as a fox scarf. Glancing over, Echidna's dark eyes turned toward the entrance of the guest room. Anastasia Summer, I am back. Shortly after following her gaze, Julius appeared from the other side of the door. The handsome Julius held his knight's sword in one hand and a slender man in the other. Julius had been ordered to separate from the others and pick him up. The figure shook his long grey hair, and as he raised his head with a pitiful expression. Now I'm troubled by this all happening so suddenly. My chest is burning and aching, and with this swordsman here shaking me all about, it's all so terrible. Anastasia, instead of complainin' so much like a chitterin' bird, shouldn't you be thankin' me and my knight? You might be their target, after all. What? Wearing a look of surprise, it was the one who had been restrained earlier in the back of the carriage, the stargazer, Ubilk. Apparently, he was in a position where he was a beneficial asset to the Empire, and was also a valuable source of information for it in its fight against the Great Disaster. In order to prevent him from being killed, Julius was sent to him. Anastasia, with Garf Kun, I thought there would have been a lot of detours due to him wanderin' off and foolin' bout. Garfield, I'm fightin' properly, you know. Stop complainin'. Anastasia, really? If I didn't ask you to do this job, wouldn't you have gone to help Halibel outside instead? Garfield, Gra? Snarling with an expression that proved she had hit the bullseye, Garfield's fangs quivered. The coupled dragon carriage was being continuously attacked by their enemies, but ensuring the biggest threat could not approach them, keeping the evil dragon at bay on his own, was Halibel. The fierce dragon's roar could occasionally be heard along with the accompanying sky-cracking boom. If he were not the strongest of the city-states, it would be impossible to stall the world's most powerful species. Julius, Garfield, thank you very much for protecting Anastasia Summer and the others. I extend my respect for your bravery. Garfield, shut up. Just like the captain, my amazing self ain't too good at dealin' with ya. Julius, that is regrettable. As with Subaru, I was hoping to become friends with you as well. Garfield, grrrrrr. Garfield vigorously growled at the words Julius spoke in his face, thrusting out his fist. As if intersecting with Julius, the coordination demolished the undead that appeared behind one another. Even if Garfield would not admit it, the two top-notch warriors were perfectly in sync. Anastasia, however, this is all just a stopgap. I don't want to stop the dragon carriage, but if it stops then that'll be the end of the line. We have to get the situation moving somewhere, right? Nuage. With a deep and burly roar, a golden mace was swung. The horizontal impact scythed down the undead clad in bulky armor all at once, and the enemies that had been flung off of the top of the dragon carriage crumbled into dust even before they even crashed into the ground. However, even after dealing with several enemies at once, the number of foes did not abate. Damn it. Such shrewd tricks. Angered was his stern face, covered in beard and scars, and Go's Ralphon roared like a lion. In Go's field of vision, he could see a swarm of undead flying dragons blanketing the sky, deploying the undead clutched in their talons down onto the coupled dragon carriages one after the other. This bold method of transport was the worst possible mechanism by which the enemy soldiers could board the coupled dragon carriages. Throwing the enemy soldiers down did not ensure that every one of them could catch hold of the coupled dragon carriages. Rather, nearly half of the soldiers failed to catch the coupled dragon carriages, and after being thrown by the undead flying dragons, simply fell to the ground below, and the outrageous occurrence of the impact reducing their resurrected bodies back into dust was repeated over and over. However, even a military deployment that could only be called a suicidal act for a living soldier turned into an efficient means of transportation that can be used without the fear of losses using dead soldiers. And thus, implementing it was Go's It is the pruning core of Her Excellency Lamia. Those had rushed to protect the ground dragons, who were of the most important position at the foremost wagon of the coupled dragon carriages, and he glared at the sky where the worst assortment of undead were being brought by the flock of deceased flying dragons. The pruning corps were the malevolent group that had carried out what came to be known in the Wallachian Empire as the Great Purge. Every member was clad in an armor that disguised their facial features, and wielding massive great shears, they pruned any person deemed unnecessary for their master's supremacy. That was the purpose of the pruning corps. The reason the name of that group went down in the history of the Empire was because a girl from the imperial family, Lamia Godwin, 9 years old at the time, had massacred all the armies of the mid-counts who had incited a rebellion. The victims of the purge had been made to suffer gruesome torment, thoroughly tasting the hell of this world. Naturally, the young princess had all her subordinates carry out all kinds of malevolent violence that would be a large burden for even those who got their hands dirty, thereby perfecting her malevolent squadron with ironclad loyalty. Just how much control she had over the hearts of her soldiers was on full display in this strategy. The fact that even in death, that which gnawed at their very souls, Lamia's poison, had not faded in the slightest, and then? My. Even though so many years have passed, to think you would remember me and my adorable beasts, I am glad. Suddenly, a fear-inducing, sickly sweet voice descended from above. At that moment, Goes, paying no heed to appearances, raised his mace overhead, and deflecting the bright red swing head-on, leapt backwards. Immediately after, the mace that Goes held caught fire. It was a matter of course. After all, the brilliance of the Yang sword dazzlingly illuminated all things. Goes, by no means, to think that you would descend onto the battlefield yourself. Your Excellency Lamia Godwin. Lamia, is it really so surprising? With this body, that is the best choice, is it not? Clenching down on his molars, Goes glared straight ahead, and in his vision was a noble undead who smiled bewitchingly. The blood-red opulent dress, the dazzling array of jewelry, and the natural beauty characteristic of the Wallachian imperial family, which caused the value of the items which adorned their beauty to plummet. However, that too, when coupled with the pale cracked skin and eerie golden irises, she was but a shadow of her former self. In the past, during the imperial selection ceremony, the poisoned Princess Lamia Godwin had vied for the throne against Vincent Wallachia, and could have become the empress. As if testifying that she had completely changed, she looked down at the half of her body that Goes had shattered with his counterattack. However, where other undead would have crumbled to dust from such a blow, Lamia's body did not shatter. Instead, the cracks mended themselves, restoring her original form. Goes, that body. Lamia, an immortal body that shall not be lost, no matter how much it is crushed or destroyed. Alas, it does not seem to be something so convenient that I can boast about it in such a manner. Lamia, gently stroking the part that had been repaired, wielded the Yang sword with that very hand, as if to prove that she had indeed recovered. In her arms, the dazzling beauty of the unfaltering treasured sword, instead seemed all the more blasphemous. Goes frowned at that fact, to which Lamia muttered, "How unpleasant." Lamia, although you could not calm down and have a chat at the Crystal Palace either, I wonder if you could stop making such a scary face, General Second-Class Ralphon? Goes, Gah. Lamia, you have become a General First Class now, have you not? I heard about that. So Vincent Neosama has reinstated the system of the 9 divine generals? That is very much like him to do. Placing the hand not holding the Yang sword against her chin, Lamia parted her lips to the side. Those gestures and speech were unmistakably those of Lamia, whom Goes had also come to interact with while she was still alive, and he was both horrified and angered by the technique that allowed for the undead to replicate her former behavior. Indifferent to his inner thoughts, Lamia looked at Goes's armor from top to bottom and said, Lamia, the 9 divine generals, it is structured so that rising to the top is measured solely by strength. It is the perfect way to gather mindless, easily controllable pawns. Goes, certainly, Part of the context behind His Excellency's reinstatement of the 9 divine generals was an intention to prepare a countermeasure against the current great disaster. That is something I acknowledge. Lamia, though from the way you say it, it seems you have an objection? Goes, with all due respect. Lamia's statement, it sounded like it was praising Vincent's thoughts. Before they opposed each other in the imperial selection ceremony, it was said that Lamia had been quite fond of Vincent. Though life and death had separated their paths, her confidence in him remained intact even after death. However, goes, Your Excellency Lamia, how much do you know of the time when you were not alive? Lamia, what a strange question. Unfortunately, I know nothing from the time I was dead. Right now, I am in the middle of brushing up on all the various things that have happened. I would not mind if you were to teach me a little. Goes, then just one thing. Pardon my rudeness, I wish to correct you. Lamia, goes, as Your Excellency Lamia has rightly observed, the 9 divine generals of the present age are all highly capable. They are all strong individuals who make light of even myself. But, there is not a single one among them who is an easy pawn to control. Puffing out his chest adorned in golden armor, Goes emphatically boasted out loud. Supposing that in preparation for the battle against the great disaster, Vincent had reinstated the 9 divine generals in hopes of having pawns that would do exactly as they were told, it could be said that his plan had failed. Every general first class was a hardened troublemaker, there was no way such a thing could be done so easily. Goes, it is not to the extent Your Excellency Lamia believes. The magnificence of the empire is not summed up within His Excellency alone. Lamia, I wonder, could that be an insult to Vincent Niyasama? Goes, no. Never. Not at all, Your Excellency Lamia. At Lamia's narrowed eyes and the slightly sharp tone she had put into her words, Goes shook his head. Lamia was angered by the feelings he had expressed about Vincent, but Goes was also sensitive to any disrespect or rude remarks made about His Excellency the Emperor. However, ever since the decision to abandon the imperial capital, his stance had changed slightly. All of it had not been influenced by Goes himself, but rather by a change in Vincent. Goes, I am relying on your work, he told me. Lamia, what did you just say? Goes, Your Excellency Lamia, His Excellency Vincent Wallachia, who your esteemed self knew was indeed outstanding. And yet, now, even more. His Excellency the Emperor is changing, striving for even greater excellence. Lamia, Goes, the Wallachian Empire, hereafter, will continue to flourish more and more. For that reason, we cannot let the hindrance from those who have once died go uncontrolled any longer. In the sense of seeking perfection from the Emperor, Goes and Lamia were very much alike. But, what decisively differentiated the two was their respective knowledge from the passage of the last 9 years. Those who continued to walk forward in time, they would leave behind those who had halted their step, that was a fact. Goes, a wise man who does not cease his onward march. Surpassing even the expectations and predictions of those who have halted, and pushing even further beyond. That is the apex of the Wallachian Empire, His Excellency the Emperor. Raising the blazing head of his mace aloft, Goes shook off his hesitation, and he charged forward. Up until that point, his love and reverence for Lamia, a member of the Wallachian imperial family despite her altered appearance, had fettered Goes. But, those shackles were torn apart by a stronger and more fervent loyalty. Goes, ooh-ah. Raising a mighty roar, Goes' singular swing drew a semicircle, and slammed down onto Lamia. Possessing unparalleled Herculean strength, a strike from Goes using all of his might was not easy to block, even if the opponent was one of the 9 divine generals. Even more so for the slender arm of a woman, even if that arm held the Yang sword. In fact, Lamia did not even try to block Goes' strike with the Yang sword that she wielded. Lamia, with that unwise head of yours, you sure talk a lot, General First Class Ralphon. I am actually rather impressed, so I shall inform you. Her thin lips moved, and Lamia fixed her gaze on Goes with a beautiful smile. The figure of the woman received the head of the descending mace in its entirety, and without offering even the slightest resistance, it shattered like ceramic, and was blown away into smithereens. Right after stating her intention to tell him something, she had been reduced to dust beyond any hope of repair. Of course, there was also the matter raised in the War Council earlier. Even if the undead were defeated, there was a possibility that they would rise again through the medium of the so-called core bug that the magicians from the kingdom had discovered. Goes, even so. The defeat of Lamia here, it should be a turning point in the situation. If the pruning core no longer had someone to give them explicit orders, depending on the presence or absence of a commander, no, the difference in their ability would already be an advantage to his side. That confidence of Goes was. Are you listening, General First Class Ralphon? Goes, HK? Once again, the moment when the sickly sweet voice grazed his ears, Goes's mace was swung directly behind him. In its path, it slammed into the figure of the enemy and, piercing through the torso, had split their body in two with a sound like shattering pottery. As that was smashed and blown away in the corner of his vision, Goes gulped. Because the enemy he had reflexively struck down, that which had been turned into dust and vanished, had a face that should have been impossible. The reason being that it was the very same as the one Goes had defeated with his own hands just a moment ago. Even though you rarely say clever things, it is just as you say. Goes, impossible. Faced with the strange sight that should have never been, the hand gripping the mace began to quake and tremble. Whether that was out of anger or some other emotion, even Goes himself could not discern. What was certain, however, was that it was blasphemy. A blasphemy against the Walachian Empire, to which the Lion Knight, Goes Ralphon, had sworn his loyalty. This is a war of annihilation, between us who were left behind in the past, and you lot. This is a war of annihilation, between us who were left behind in the past, and you lot. This is a war of annihilation, between us who were left behind in the past, and you lot. Having declared thus, Lamia Godwin, who should have been shattered, smiled at Goes. Wielding countless Yang swords in their hands, innumerable poison princesses, innumerable Lamia Godwins, smiled at him. Poison princesses, innumerable Lamia Godwins, smiled at him.